I walked into the ballroom of the most expensive hotel in the city, clutching a small, heartfelt gift wrapped in brown paper. The music stopped. The chatter died. And then a voice cut through the silence like a serrated knife. "The stinky country boy is here." It was the bride, my son's fiancé. She pointed a manicured finger at me, sneering, as she whispered to her mother loud enough for half the room to hear. I assumed Marcus had told him to stay in the barn with the pigs. My throat tightened. I turned to leave, ready to write them both out of my will that very night. But my son Marcus grabbed my arm. His grip was bruising. He pulled me close, and what he whispered in my ear made my blood run cold and froze me on the spot. "Dad, do not leave. They are planning to force me to sign over the deed to your farm tonight. I need you to stay and watch me burn them to the ground." If you have ever been underestimated because of how you look, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments which city you are watching from. I want to know where my real people are. My name is Isaiah Jefferson. Most people around here just call me Zeke. I am 75 years old, and if you saw me walking down the street, you would probably cross to the other side. Not because I am dangerous, but because I look like I just crawled out from under a tractor. And usually I have. I wear denim overalls stained with red Georgia clay boots that have seen more miles than a long-haul trucker, and a cap that has lost its color from decades of sweating in the sun. To the world, I am just an old, broke black man living on a dirt farm at the edge of the county. But what nobody knows, not even my own son Marcus, is that I own the construction company that built the very hotel I was standing in. I retired 10 years ago after my wife Beatrice passed away. I put a CEO in charge, set up a blind trust, and went back to the land. I have millions sitting in accounts I rarely touch. I own the land the new highway is being built on. I own the apartment complexes downtown. But I prefer the company of my tomatoes and my chickens to the sharks and suits I spent 40 years fighting. I wanted a simple life. But tonight, simplicity was not on the menu. I stood in the doorway of the grand ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton. I was not wearing my overalls tonight. I was wearing my Sunday best. The problem is, my Sunday best is a polyester suit I bought in 1995 for my nephew's graduation. It is a little tight in the shoulders now, and the fabric has that shine that screams discount rack. My shoes were polished, but if you looked closely you could still see the faint outline of mud in the seams. You can take the man out of the country, but you cannot scrub 40 years of soil out of the leather. The room was dripping with crystals and gold. Waiters in white gloves moved like ghosts between tables loaded with food that cost more than my tractor. The guests were all the same. White, wealthy, and wearing expressions that said they smelled something rotting. I took a step forward and I saw heads turn. It was not the look of curiosity. It was the look you give a stray dog that wanders into a fine dining restaurant. I saw them whispering behind their champagne flutes. I saw a man in a tuxedo motion to a security guard, then hesitate when he saw me wave at the groom. I kept my head high. I am a Jefferson. My father sharecropped on land I now own. I do not bow my head to anyone but God. I walked across the plush carpet, my old shoes squeaking with every step. I was looking for Marcus. I wanted to give him my blessing even though I had a bad feeling in my gut about this girl. And then I saw her. Tiffany Sinclair. She was standing in the center of the room, surrounded by her bridesmaids, looking like a princess in a magazine. She was beautiful, I will give her that. Blonde hair, blue eyes, skin that looked like it had never seen a day of hard work. But her beauty was just paint on a crumbling wall. I had met her only twice before. Both times she had refused to come out of the car at my farm complaining about the smell of fertilizer. She had spoken to me like I was the help, asking if I could wash her windshield while she waited for Marcus. She turned and saw me. Her smile dropped faster than a stone in a well. She did not wave. She did not come over to greet her future father-in-law. Instead, she leaned toward her mother, a woman named Victoria, who looked like an older, harder version of Tiffany, and she said it. The words that sucked the air out of the room. "Oh my God, the stinky country boy is here. I thought Marcus told him to stay home and shovel manure." Victoria, her mother, didn't even bother to whisper. She wrinkled her nose, waving her hand in front of her face as if I were a cloud of toxic gas. Does he not own a mirror or a bar of soap? This is humiliating, Tiffany. You cannot have that sitting at the head table. He will ruin the photos. He looks like a beggar. I stopped. I was 20 feet away, but I heard every word. My hearing is the only thing age hasn't taken from me. The guests nearby giggled. It was a cruel, sharp sound. I felt the heat rise up my neck. It wasn't shame. I stopped feeling shame in 1968. It was rage. Cold, hard rage. I looked down at the gift in my hand. It was Beatrice's Bible. The one she carried down the aisle when we got married 50 years ago. Inside, I had tucked a check for $50,000, a down payment for a house. I wanted to surprise them. I wanted to help them start their life even if I didn't like the girl. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I showed them kindness, they would show me respect. What a foolish old man I was. I looked at Tiffany. She was glaring at me with pure hatred. It wasn't just that I was old or that I looked poor. It was that I was there. My existence was in stain on her perfect white evening. She snapped her fingers at a waiter. "Get some air freshener spray for that corner," she hissed. "It smells like wet dog." That was it. I was done. I don't need their food. I don't need their approval. And clearly my son didn't need me if he was going to stand there and let this happen. I hadn't seen Marcus yet, but if he was marrying this woman, he was lost. I turned around slowly. My joints popped. I was going to walk out that door, get in my rusted 2004 pickup truck, drive back to my farm, and tomorrow morning, I was going to call my lawyer Cohen. I was going to change my will. I was going to leave every single dime to the local animal shelter. At least dogs are loyal. I took one step toward the exit, then another. Wait. A hand clamped onto my arm. It wasn't a gentle touch. It was desperate. I turned and saw Marcus. My son looked terrible. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, but his face was pale, sweating. His eyes were wide and red-rimmed like he hadn't slept in a week. He looked like a man marching to the gallows, not an altar. I looked at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. "Let go, Marcus," I said, my voice low and steady. "I am going home. I am clearly not welcome here, and I will not stay where I am not wanted. You can tell your bride she won. The stinky country boy is leaving." "No," Marcus said. His voice cracked. He didn't let go. He squeezed harder, his fingers digging into the cheap fabric of my suit. "Dad, please. You can't leave." "Why?" I asked. "So she can insult me again, so her mother can spray me with Lysol. I raised you to be a man, Marcus, a man who demands respect. If you are going to stand there and let that woman treat your father like cattle, then I don't have a son." Marcus flinched as if I had slapped him. He looked over his shoulder. Tiffany was watching us, her eyes narrowed, tapping her foot impatiently. She started walking toward us, a fake, sweet smile plastered on her face, ready to intervene. Marcus leaned in close. He put his mouth right next to my ear. I could smell the fear on him. It smelled like sour sweat and expensive scotch. "Dad, listen to me," he whispered, the words rushing out in a panic. "It is not what you think. I know who she is. I know what they are." I frowned, pulling back slightly to look at him. "Then why are you marrying her? Why are you letting them treat us like this? Because they have me trapped." Marcus hissed, tears welling in his eyes. "But tonight, they are going to make a move. They think I own the farm. They think the deed is in my name. Preston, her father, has a notary coming in an hour. They are going to corner me in the VIP lounge and force me to sign over the land rights to a shell company they own. They think I am weak. They think I will just roll over." I stared at him. The farm. My farm. The land Beatrice and I bought 40 years ago when nobody else would sell to us. The land where her ashes were scattered under the big oak tree. They wanted it. "Why?" I asked. "It's just dirt and vegetables. Why do these high society vultures want my dirt? Because of the lithium, Dad," Marcus whispered. "A geological survey leaked last week. There is a deposit under the south pasture. They think it's worth $20 million. They are broke, Dad. The Sinclairs are drowning in debt. They need that land to save themselves." My mind raced. Lithium. Millions. Bankrupt socialites. And my son caught in the middle. "I need you to stay," Marcus said, his voice trembling but cold. "I need you to be the distraction. Let them mock you. Let them treat you like trash. Let them think we are stupid, helpless country folk. Because while they are busy laughing at your shoes, I am going to record everything. I am going to get their confession, but I can't do it alone. I need my father." Tiffany was 10 feet away now. Marcus pulled back, masking his fear with a wide, fake grin. He patted my shoulder loudly. "Thanks for coming, Dad. Just try to stay out of the way, okay?" He looked me in the eye. A silent plea, a silent promise. I looked at Tiffany, who had stopped just within earshot. She was smirking, thinking Marcus was putting me in my place. "Oh, Marcus, honey," she cooed, sliding her arm through his. "Is everything okay? Is he leaving? We really need to get started with the toasts." I looked at her. I looked at the greedy gleam in her eyes. I looked at her mother, Victoria, who was watching us like a hawk from the bar. I looked at my son, who was sweating but standing his ground. I straightened my tie. I brushed a speck of invisible dust off my cheap lapel. I forced a smile that showed all my teeth, the smile of a wolf pretending to be a sheep. "No, ma'am," I said, making my voice sound thick and slow, adding a heavy country drawl that I usually kept hidden. "I ain't leaving. Marcus was just telling me where to sit so I don't disturb the fancy folks. I promise I'll be quiet as a mouse." Tiffany clapped her hands, delighted. "Perfect. There is a table right by the kitchen door. It is cozy, just for you. Now hurry along." She turned her back on me, pulling Marcus away toward the center of the room. I stood there for a moment, clutching Beatrice's Bible. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from the thrill of the hunt. They wanted the stinky country boy. They were going to get him. They thought they were the predators in this room. They had no idea they had just invited the lion into their den. I walked toward the kitchen table, my muddy shoes squeaking on the marble floor. Let the games begin. I was seated at a small round table that wobbled every time someone walked by. It was shoved into the far corner right next to the swinging metal doors of the kitchen. Every few seconds, a waiter would burst through, carrying trays of filet mignon and lobster, leaving behind a gust of hot air that smelled of dish soap and grease. This was the reserve table. The table for the help. The table for the embarrassments. I looked around. There were no centerpieces here, no crystal glasses, just a paper napkin and a glass of water that looked like it had been sitting out since yesterday. From my exile in the corner, I had a perfect view of the main stage. I watched the Sinclair family. They moved like a pack of wolves circling a wounded deer. My son Marcus was the deer. He was seated at the head table, flanked on both sides by his future in-laws. Preston Sinclair, Tiffany's father, was a large man with a face that looked like it had been sunburnt for 20 years. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my first house, but it fit him poorly, straining at the buttons as he leaned over Marcus. I saw him pour wine into Marcus's glass, not out of hospitality, but to lubricate the conversation. I focused my hearing. Years of listening for the crack of timber or the hum of a faulty generator had trained my ears to pick up sounds others missed. Amidst the clinking of silverware and the low hum of jazz, I heard Preston's voice. It was loud, booming, the voice of a man who loved to hear himself speak. "So, son," Preston said, clapping a heavy hand on Marcus's shoulder. The impact made Marcus flinch, but he kept that frozen smile on his face. "We need to talk about the asset merger. Victoria and I have been looking at the portfolio. Tiffany is a girl who is used to a certain standard, you understand. She cannot be worrying about fluctuating corn prices or whatever it is you people do out there in the dirt." I saw Marcus nod slowly, taking a sip of wine. He looked terrified, but I knew my boy. I looked closer. His hands were shaking, yes, but his eyes were sharp. He was listening. Preston continued, leaning in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial growl that still carried across the room. "That land of your father's. It is dead weight, Marcus. Total garbage. Just sitting there collecting dust and bugs. We have a contact in Miami, a developer who wants to pivot into cryptocurrency mining. They need land for server farms. We should sell early, liquidate that trash asset, and dump it all into the new coin offering. It is the future sun. We could triple the value in a month." I sat back in my wobbly chair, clasping my hands over my stomach. Trash asset? He called the land my great-grandfather bled for, the land Beatrice and I built into an empire, a trash asset. But then a realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. It was so simple, so beautiful, that I almost laughed out loud right there in the corner. They thought Marcus owned the farm. Of course they did. They saw an old man in overalls and a young man in a suit, and they assumed the old man was just a squatter on his son's property. They assumed that when Beatrice died, everything passed to the next generation. They had not done their homework. They were so blinded by their own greed and their own prejudice that they never bothered to pull the actual property records. If they had, they would have seen that the farm, the construction company, the apartment buildings, and every single acre of land were held in the Beatrice and Isaiah Jefferson Irrevocable Trust. Marcus was a trustee. He had management rights. He could hire, he could fire, he could sign checks for feed and seed, but he could not sell. Only one person had the signature authority to liquidate the assets: Me, the stinky country boy in the corner. They were pressuring Marcus to sign a document that would be worthless the moment the ink dried. They were trying to rob a bank, but they were holding the gun to the wrong person. I watched Preston fill Marcus's glass again. I watched Victoria Tiffany's mother whisper something in Marcus's other ear, pointing at a diamond necklace on her phone. They were circling, biting, trying to tear chunks off him before the wedding cake was even cut. My heart swelled with a strange mixture of pride and fury. Marcus was taking it. He was sitting there letting them belittle his heritage, letting them insult his father's legacy, just so we could catch them in the act. He was playing the role of the weak, submissive son perfectly. Suddenly a shadow fell over my table. The scent of expensive, cloying perfume filled my nose, masking the smell of the kitchen grease. I looked up. It was the bride, Tiffany. She was holding a small plate. On it were 3 cold shrimp, a half-eaten bread roll, and a few carrot sticks that looked like they had been rescued from the bottom of a veggie tray. She didn't place the plate down gently. She dropped it. The ceramic clattered loudly against the wood, and a shrimp slid off onto the dirty tablecloth. Here she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, but her eyes cold as ice. I told the kitchen to scrape something together for you. We cannot have you going hungry, can we? I looked at the sad little plate. It was leftovers. Scraps. She was feeding her future father-in-law the garbage. I looked up at her face. She was not even looking at me. She was scanning the room, making sure none of her important friends were watching her talk to the help. "Eat fast, old man," she hissed, her voice dropping the sweet act. "The VIPs are arriving in 20 minutes. The senator is coming. My father's investors are coming. I do not want them to see you. You are an eyesore." She leaned in, her manicured hand resting on the edge of the table. "Once you are done with your snack, I want you to go out back. Marcus's truck is parked by the dumpster. Go sit in it. Wait there until the reception is over. Do not come back inside. Do not talk to anyone. You have already embarrassed me enough just by existing. If you ruin this night for me, I will make sure Marcus never speaks to you again. Do you understand me?" I looked at her. I looked at the cold shrimp on the table. I looked at the woman who wanted to turn my family's legacy into a crypto server farm. She thought she was the queen of this castle. She thought she held all the cards. I picked up the plastic fork she had thrown on the table. I poked at the bread roll. I slowly raised my eyes to meet hers. I didn't glare. I didn't scowl. I gave her the warmest, most simple-minded smile I could muster. I let my shoulders slump. I made my eyes look watery and dim. "Thank you, daughter-in-law," I said, my voice cracking just enough to sound pathetic. "This looks mighty fine. I surely do appreciate you feeding me. I know I don't belong in here with the fancy folks. I'll eat up quick and go wait in the truck with the dogs. I won't make a peep." Tiffany let out a breath of relief, rolling her eyes. "Good. At least you know your place." She turned on her heel, her white dress swishing around her ankles, and marched back toward the head table, ready to play the blushing bride. She didn't look back. She didn't see the way my smile vanished the second she turned away. She didn't see me take the napkin and carefully wipe the grease from my fingers. She didn't see me reach into my pocket and check that my phone was still recording. I looked at the plate of leftovers. I didn't touch it. I sat there in the shadow of the kitchen door, watching them celebrate their victory. They thought they had won. They thought they had banished the stinky country boy to the parking lot. They had no idea that I wasn't leaving. I was just waiting. I was waiting for the notary. I was waiting for the contract. And I was waiting for the moment when I would turn their perfect white wedding into a funeral for their greed. I sat back, crossed my arms, and watched. Eat, drink, and be merry, Tiffany. Because tomorrow, you starve. The sun had barely crested over the pine trees, casting long golden shadows across the red Georgia clay. It was the kind of morning that usually brought me peace. The air was crisp, smelling of dew and damp earth. I was out in the vegetable garden, the one Beatrice and I had planted 40 years ago. My hands were covered in soil as I carefully thinned the rows of collard greens. These weren't just vegetables to me. They were a testament to survival. Every leaf represented a season we had weathered, a storm we had endured. I was humming an old hymn, trying to wash the taste of last night's humiliation out of my mouth with the clean air of my own land. But peace, it seems, was a luxury I could no longer afford. The sound of an engine roaring up the gravel driveway shattered the silence. It wasn't the familiar rattle of my neighbor's truck or the hum of a tractor. It was the aggressive, high-pitched whine of a luxury SUV engine being pushed too hard. I stood up, wiping my hands on my overalls, and watched as a white Range Rover tore around the bend, kicking up a cloud of dust that settled over my prize-winning tomatoes. The car skidded to a halt right in front of the farmhouse, dangerously close to the porch steps. The doors flew open. Out stepped Tiffany and her mother, Victoria. They looked completely out of place, like two orchids thrown into a pigsty. Victoria was wearing a cream-colored pantsuit and heels that looked like weapons. Tiffany was in a sundress that probably cost more than the feed bill for the entire year, paired with wedges that sank immediately into the soft ground. They didn't knock. They didn't call out a greeting. They just started marching toward me, their eyes scanning my property with the cold calculation of developers looking at a teardown. I stayed where I was, leaning on my hoe, watching them approach. I let my shoulders slump. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I put the mask back on. The simple, slow old man. The stinky country boy. Victoria reached me first. She stopped about 5 feet away, pulling a silk handkerchief from her purse and pressing it firmly over her nose and mouth. Her eyes darted around the garden, landing on the rows of vegetables, the chicken coop in the distance, and the compost pile near the fence. Good Lord, she muffled through the silk. The smell is absolutely atrocious. It smells like rotting earth and animal filth. How does anyone live like this? I touched the brim of my cap. Morning, ma'am, I said, keeping my voice low and thick. That's just the smell of honest work. Fertilizer and growth. It's good for the soul. Victoria didn't even look at me. She turned to Tiffany, gesturing vaguely at the expanse of green behind me. This all has to go, Tiffany. Immediately. We cannot have the wedding reception here with this stench. It will ruin the appetizers. Tiffany nodded, typing furiously on her phone. I know, Mother. I already texted the contractor. We can pave over this section for the parking lot. And that she pointed a manicured finger directly at my vegetable garden, the one I was standing in, that needs to be leveled. My grip tightened on the hoe handle. Leveled. Victoria took a step forward, her sharp heel coming down directly onto a young bell pepper plant. I heard the crunch of the stem breaking. She didn't even notice. She twisted her foot, grinding the green life into the red dirt. Yes, leveled, Victoria declared. A mini golf course would be much more appropriate. Something whimsical. Or perhaps a croquet lawn. Anything is better than this. Subsistence farming nonsense. It looks like poverty, Tiffany. It looks desperate. I looked down at the crushed plant under her heel. That pepper plant was a heritage seed passed down from my grandmother. It had survived droughts and floods. It didn't survive a socialite's shoe. I felt a flash of heat in my chest, a roar of anger that wanted to tear through the act I was putting on. I wanted to tell her to get her foot off my land. I wanted to tell her that the dirt she was standing on was worth more than her entire fake existence. But I remembered Marcus. I remembered the lithium. I remembered the trap we were setting. So I swallowed the rage. I let it burn in my gut like moonshine. I surely do like my peppers, ma'am, I said softly, looking at the ground. Me and Beatrice, we planted these. Oh, stop it! Tiffany snapped, cutting me off. Nobody cares about your dead wife's peppers, Zeke. We are talking about the future. We are talking about aesthetics. She marched up to me, avoiding the mud puddles with practiced ease. She was holding a plastic garment bag. She didn't hand it to me. She threw it. It hit me in the chest and slid down to the dirt. Pick it up, she ordered. I slowly bent down my knees, cracking audibly, and picked up the bag. I unzipped it. Inside was a uniform. It was a dark green jumpsuit made of cheap, stiff polyester. On the breast pocket there was an embroidered patch that read staff. What's this for, Miss Tiffany? I asked, holding it up. It looked like something a janitor would wear in a prison. It is for next week, she said, crossing her arms. The photographer is coming to do the pre-wedding shoot. We are going to use the barn as a backdrop. Rustic chic is very in right now. I nodded slowly. Okay. You want me to clean the barn up for you? No, you old fool, she hissed. I want you to be in the background, but not as yourself. She stepped closer, her perfume clashing violently with the smell of the damp earth. Listen to me very carefully. When the photographer is here and when the guests start arriving for the rehearsal, you are not Marcus's father. You are not the owner of this farm. You are the gardener. You are the hired help. You have worked for Marcus's family for 30 years. You are simple-minded, loyal, and silent. My heart hammered against my ribs. She wanted to erase me. She didn't just want my land. She wanted to rewrite my history. She wanted to turn the man who owned the deed into a prop for her vanity. You want me to pretend I ain't his daddy? I asked, letting my voice tremble. Yes, she said, her eyes flashing with cruelty. Because frankly, Zeke, it is embarrassing. Look at you. You are a stain on Marcus's image. I have told my friends that Marcus comes from old money, that his family are gentlemen farmers. You look like you sleep in the stable. If anyone asks who you are, you point to the weeds and you keep walking. If you say one word about being his father, I will have security escort you off the property. Do you understand? Victoria chimed in from behind her, examining a fingernail. It is for the best, really. It is a kindness. You wouldn't fit in with our crowd anyway. This way you have a purpose. You can serve drinks if we run short on staff. I looked at the green jumpsuit in my hands. It was the ultimate insult. They wanted to dress me up like a doll and force me to serve them on my own land. They wanted to strip away my dignity along with my name. I looked at Tiffany. She was waiting for a fight. She wanted me to argue so she could run to Marcus and claim I was being difficult. She wanted ammunition. I wasn't going to give it to her. I clutched the uniform to my chest like it was a precious gift. I forced a tear to well up in my eye. I nodded vigorously, bobbing my head like a bobblehead doll. Yes, ma'am, I said, my voice thick with fake gratitude. I understand. I surely do. I don't want to shame Marcus. He's a good boy. I'll wear the suit. I'll be the best gardener you ever saw. I won't say a mumbling word to nobody. Just point me where to weed and I'll weed. Tiffany smirked, a look of pure triumph. See, Mother, I told you he was trainable. You just have to be firm. Good, Victoria said, turning back to the car. Now let's go. I can feel the humidity ruining my blowout. And Zeke, do something about that smell before next week. Buy some Febreze, gallons of it. They turned and walked back to the Range Rover, their heels clicking on the stones. They didn't say goodbye. They just got in, revved the engine, and sped off, leaving me standing in the dust with a cheap green jumpsuit in my hands. I watched them go until the white car disappeared around the bend. The moment they were gone, the slump in my shoulders vanished. I stood up straight, stretching to my full height of 6'2". I tossed the jumpsuit onto the porch bench. I looked down at the crushed pepper plant. I knelt and gently packed the dirt around the broken stem, though I knew it was too late to save it. They thought I was trainable. They thought I was a prop. They thought they had won. I wiped the dirt from my hands and walked into the house. I didn't go to the kitchen. I went straight to the study in the back, the room that was always locked. The room Marcus had never even seen the inside of. I unlocked the heavy oak door and stepped inside. It wasn't a farmhouse study. It was a command center. 3 monitors sat on a mahogany desk. Filing cabinets lined the walls, filled with deeds, contracts, and blueprints. I sat down in my leather chair and picked up the secure landline phone. I didn't dial Marcus. I dialed the one man who hated bullies more than I did. Cohen. He picked up on the first ring. Isaiah. It is early. Is everything all right? Cohen was 70 years old, a Jewish lawyer who had been my partner in fighting city hall zoning boards and racist contractors for 40 years. He was the shark I kept in the tank. It started, Cohen, I said, my voice low and hard, stripping away every trace of the country accent. They are moving on the property. They tried to demote me to the help on my own land. I heard the rustle of papers on the other end. Cohen didn't ask for details. He knew the drill. What do you need? I need a full financial autopsy on the Sinclair family, I said. Not just a credit check. I want to know everything. I want to know who holds their mortgage. I want to know about their credit card debt. I want to know if they have paid their taxes. I want to know what they eat for breakfast and who they owe for it. Dig deep, Cohen. I think they are drowning and they are trying to use my son as a life raft. I heard the click of a keyboard. Consider it done, Cohen said. I'll have a preliminary report by tonight. Isaiah. Yeah, give them hell. I hung up the phone. I looked out the window at my garden, at the dust still settling in the driveway. They wanted to build a mini golf course on my wife's garden. They wanted to dress me in polyester and make me mute. I picked up the green jumpsuit from the porch through the window. I would wear it. Oh yes, I would wear it. I would play their game. I would be the best damn gardener they had ever seen. Because the closer I was to them, the more I would hear. And when the time came to take off the mask, I wouldn't just be the gardener. I would be the grim reaper of their social standing. I sat back and watched the screens flicker to life. The hunt was on. The blue light of the computer monitor was the only thing illuminating my study as the clock on the wall ticked past midnight. I sat in my leather chair, a glass of bourbon untouched on the coaster, watching the email inbox refresh. Cohen had promised me a preliminary report by tonight, and Cohen never missed a deadline. At exactly 12:15, The notification chimed. The subject line was just one word: autopsy. I clicked it open. The document was 40 pages long. I didn't need to read every single line of legalese to understand the story it told. It was a story of rot, a story of decay painted over with gold leaf. I scrolled through the financial history of the Sinclair family, and what I saw made my stomach turn. They weren't just broke, they were destitute. Preston Sinclair hadn't made a legitimate dollar in 7 years. His investment firm was a shell, a ghost ship floating on a sea of debt. They had filed for Chapter 11, bankruptcy protection, 5 years ago in Florida, hiding it under a limited liability company to keep their social standing in Georgia intact. They were living on credit cards that were maxed out to the limit, paying off one Visa with another MasterCard, a house of cards waiting for a stiff breeze to knock it over. Their mansion on the hill. It was in foreclosure. The bank had sent the final notice 3 weeks ago. They had 30 days to pay $2 million or get out. That was the deadline. That was why they were rushing the wedding. That was why they needed my land. But the financial ruin wasn't the worst part. I kept scrolling past the tax liens and the lawsuits until I reached the section Cohen had highlighted in red. It was a list of names. Men's names. Michael Sterling, David Ross, and now Marcus Jefferson. Tiffany Sinclair wasn't looking for a husband. She was looking for a host. She was a parasite, and she had done this before. Michael Sterling had been a tech entrepreneur in Austin. He married Tiffany 6 years ago. 2 years later, he was divorced. His company liquidated to pay a settlement, and Tiffany walked away with half his assets. David Ross was an oil heir in Dallas. Same story. A whirlwind romance, a quick wedding, and a brutal divorce 18 months later that left him in rehab and her with a settlement that kept the Sinclairs afloat for another 3 years. Marcus was number 3. He was the fresh meat. They had targeted him, seduced him, and trapped him specifically because they knew his father owned prime real estate. They didn't love him. They were eating him alive. I printed the report. The hum of the printer sounded like a war drum in the silent house. I took the stack of warm paper, stapled it, and shoved it into a manila envelope. I didn't need to go find Marcus. I knew he would come to me. Sure enough, 20 minutes later I saw headlights sweep across the front pasture. It wasn't the flashy sports car Tiffany made him drive. It was his old truck, the one he used to drive when he worked construction crews with me in the summers. He parked down by the barn, killing the lights immediately, trying to stay hidden. He didn't come to the front door. He knew better. I walked out the back door, the screen door slapping shut behind me. I didn't go to the house. I walked straight to the barn. The air was thick with the smell of hay and diesel. I slid the heavy wooden door open just enough to slip inside. Marcus was sitting on a bale of hay, his head in his hands. He had taken off his expensive jacket and thrown it in the dirt. His tie was undone, hanging loose around his neck like a noose he had just slipped out of. He looked up when I entered. In the dim light of the single bulb hanging from the rafters, he looked like a ghost. He looked like a man who had lost everything before he had even started. "Dad," he whispered. His voice was raw. I didn't say anything. I just walked over and leaned against the old tractor, crossing my arms over my chest. I waited. "I know," Marcus said. He didn't look at me. He looked at his boots. "I know what they are." "You know," I asked, my voice flat. Marcus nodded, a jerky, painful movement. "I ran a credit check on them 6 months ago. I know about the bankruptcy. I know about the foreclosure. I know they are drowning." I stared at him. The rage flared up in my chest again, hotter than before. "You knew. You knew they were con artists. You knew they were using you to get to my money, and you still let that woman treat me like a dog at the engagement party. You still let her call me a stinky country boy. I had to." Marcus said, his voice cracking. He looked up at me then, and his eyes were full of tears. "Dad, you don't understand. I tried to leave her. 2 months ago when I found out about the debts, I packed a bag. I was going to end it. I was going to walk away." "So why didn't you?" I demanded. "Why are we here, Marcus? Why are you marrying a woman who looks at your family with disgust?" "Because she is pregnant," Marcus said. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. I froze. "Pregnant." "She told me the night I tried to leave." Marcus continued, the words spilling out of him like a confession. "She showed me the test. She is 3 months along. Dad, it's a boy. She has the ultrasound pictures. She told me that if I left her, if I didn't go through with the wedding and sign over the assets to secure their future, she would disappear. She said she would move to Europe with her parents. She said I would never see my son. She said she would tell the child his father abandoned him." He buried his face in his hands again, his shoulders shaking. I couldn't do it, Dad. I couldn't let my son grow up without a father. I couldn't let them take him. So I made a deal with the devil. I told her I would get the farm. I told her I would get the money. I thought if I just gave them what they wanted, they would leave us alone. I thought I could buy my son's safety. I looked at my son. I saw the fear in him. I saw the manipulation that had twisted his spine until it snapped. He wasn't weak. He was a father who was being held hostage. He was trying to protect a child he hadn't even met yet. The Sinclairs had found his pressure point, and they were pressing down with all their weight. But something didn't sit right. My gut, the same gut that had warned me about bad foundations and shady business partners for 40 years, was screaming at me. I walked over to him. The straw crunched under my boots. "Stand up, Marcus." He looked up confused, but he stood. He was taller than me now, broad-shouldered, a handsome man who had been beaten down by psychological warfare. I looked him in the eye. I saw the defeat there, and I did the only thing a father could do to snap his son out of a trance. I slapped him. It wasn't a brutal blow, it wasn't an act of violence, it was a sharp, stinging slap across his cheek, quick and precise. The sound cracked through the quiet barn like a gunshot. Marcus stumbled back, his hand flying to his face, his eyes wide with shock. "Dad, Jefferson men do not get trapped," I growled, stepping into his space, forcing him to look at me. "Jefferson men do not let vultures dictate the terms of their surrender. You think you are protecting your child. You are feeding him to wolves. You think giving them the land will satisfy them. It will never be enough. Once they have the farm, they will want the construction company. Then they will want the accounts. And when you are dry, when you are nothing but a husk, they will take the child anyway and leave you in the gutter just like they did to Michael Sterling and David Ross." Marcus stared at me, the red mark on his cheek glowing in the dim light. The shock was fading, replaced by a dawning realization. "You are being played, son," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble. "You are being hunted, and you are making it easy for them. But the baby," Marcus whispered. "Even if they are thieves, Dad, the baby is innocent. I can't risk it." I narrowed my eyes. I thought about Tiffany. I thought about the champagne she had been drinking at the engagement party. She had been holding a glass. I had seen her take sips. Small sips, but sips nonetheless. I thought about the dress she wore tight against a stomach that looked as flat as a board. 3 months. "Show me the ultrasound," I said. Marcus blinked. "What? You said she has pictures. Show me." He fumbled for his phone, scrolling through his gallery with shaking fingers. He held it up. There on the screen was a grainy black and white image of a fetus. It looked real. It had a name typed at the top, Baby Sinclair Jefferson. I looked closer. I squinted. I had built hospitals. I had seen enough medical paperwork to know what it looked like. The date on the top corner was blurry. The hospital name was cut off. I looked at Marcus. "When did she go to the doctor last week?" Marcus said. "Thursday. She went to the clinic downtown." "Thursday," I repeated. "Thursday." Tiffany posted a photo on Instagram of herself getting Botox. I saw it. "I have a burner account, Marcus. I watch them." Marcus frowned. "You can't get Botox if you are pregnant." "No doctor would do it." "Exactly," I said. The silence that followed was heavier than the one before. I could see the gears turning in Marcus's head. The doubt, the fear, and then the anger. "You think she is faking it?" Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't think, Marcus. I know how predators work. They need a hook. The land wasn't enough to keep you, so she created a hostage." I turned away from him and paced the length of the barn. "We are going to find out for sure. We are not going to guess. We are going to know. And if there is no baby Marcus, if she lied about my grandchild to steal my land, then God have mercy on her soul, because I will not." Marcus straightened up. The slump in his shoulders was gone. The look of defeat was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "What do we do?" "We set a trap," I said, turning back to him. "We catch the rat in the act. She wants a new car, doesn't she? She's been complaining about your truck." "Yes," Marcus said. "She wants a G-Wagon. She says it's safer for the baby." "Good," I said. "Buy it for her." "What?" Marcus looked at me like I was crazy. "Buy it for her," I repeated. "Use the company account. I will authorize it. Tell her you want her to be safe. Tell her you want to go with her to the next appointment. Tell her you are so excited to be a father that you want to meet the doctor. Watch her face, Marcus. Watch her panic. And while you are doing that, I am going to become the janitor at that clinic. I am going to find the trash she leaves behind." Marcus took a deep breath. He wiped the tears from his face. He looked at me, and for the first time in months, I saw my son. I saw the man who could build a skyscraper from a blueprint. "Okay, Dad," he said. "Let's go hunting." I nodded. "Go home. Kiss her goodnight. Tell her you love her. Tell her you are ready to sign the papers next week. Make her feel safe." A comfortable prey is a careless prey. Marcus turned to leave. He stopped at the door. "Dad." "Yeah. Thanks for the slap. I needed it." I watched him walk back to his truck. He walked differently now. He walked like a Jefferson. I went back into my study and pulled up the file Cohen had sent. I found the section on Tiffany's medical history. I picked up the phone. It was 1:00 a.m., but I knew Cohen was awake. "Cohen," I said when he answered. "Zeke, what is it? I need you to get me a janitor's uniform for the Westside Women's Clinic," I said. "And I need a mop." Cohen didn't laugh. He didn't ask why. He just sighed. "What size XL?" I said. "And Cohen, yeah, get the eviction notices ready for the Sinclairs. We are going to need them sooner than we thought." I hung up. I looked at the picture of Beatrice on my desk. They lied about a baby Beatrice. They used an innocent life that doesn't even exist as a bargaining chip. I turned off the light. The stinky country boy was going to clean up some trash. 3 days after the incident in the barn, the peace of my farm was shattered again. This time it wasn't by an engine, but by a voice so shrill it sent the crows flying from the cornfield. I was in the machine shed, greasing the axles of the tractor, when I heard Tiffany screaming in the driveway. I wiped the grease from my hands with a rag and walked to the door, staying in the shadows. She was standing next to Marcus's pickup truck. It was a sturdy Ford F-150, reliable, strong, and yes, a little dirty. It was a working man's truck. But to Tiffany, it was a personal insult. She was refusing to open the door, her arms crossed over her chest, her face twisted in a look of absolute disgust. "I am not getting in that thing, Marcus," she shrieked. "It smells like wet dog and diesel. Do you want me to get tetanus? Is that what you want for your unborn child?" Marcus was standing by the driver's side, holding the keys. His shoulders slumped in that familiar posture of defeat. But this time I knew it was an act. I watched him closely. He wasn't flinching. He was waiting. "It's just a truck," Tiff Marcus said, his voice pleading but his eyes flat. "It's safe. It has airbags. Safe." She laughed, a cruel barking sound. "It is a death trap. The suspension is shot. Every bump in the road shakes my uterus. Do you know how delicate the first trimester is? Do you want me to lose this baby because you are too cheap to buy a vehicle that wasn't built during the Bush administration?" She placed a hand protectively over her flat stomach. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. "I need security, Marcus. I need luxury. I need a G-Wagon. It is the only car with a 5-star safety rating that fits the baby's needs. If you loved us, if you really wanted to protect this family, you wouldn't force me to ride in this garbage." I watched Marcus. He looked at me just for a second across the yard. I gave him a barely perceptible nod. "Okay," Marcus sighed, dropping his hands. "You're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't risk it." Tiffany's face transformed instantly. The anger vanished, replaced by a greedy, predatory excitement. She lowered her hand from her stomach. "Really?" she asked. "Yes," Marcus said. "I will call the dealership. I will use the company account. Dad authorized a vehicle upgrade for the business last month. We can put it under the construction firm's name for tax purposes." Tiffany didn't care about taxes. She didn't care about the firm. She only heard G-Wagon. She threw her arms around Marcus's neck, squealing, "Oh, baby, you are the best. I knew you would take care of us. Get it in black, matte black." I stepped back into the shadows of the shed. It was sickening to watch, but it was necessary. The trap was baited. She wanted a $40,000 ride to the Dr. Fine. But she didn't know that the car, the insurance, and the GPS tracker I was going to have Cohen install would all belong to Jefferson Construction. She was just a passenger in her own downfall. 2 days later, the car arrived. It was a beast of a machine, sleek and menacing. Tiffany paraded around it like she had won the lottery, snapping photos for her Instagram, posing with the key fob like it was a diamond ring. She didn't read the papers Marcus asked her to sign. She didn't notice that she was listed as an authorized driver, not the owner. She just signed her name with a flourish, blinded by the chrome. The The next morning was Thursday, the day of the appointment. I was up before the sun. I didn't put on my overalls. I put on the uniform Cohen had sent over. It was a light blue scrub set, the kind orderlies and janitors wear. It was 2 sizes too big, which was perfect. It hid my frame. I pulled on a pair of white rubber work boots and a hairnet that covered my graying hair. I looked in the mirror. Isaiah Jefferson, the millionaire land developer, was gone. In his place was Earl, the invisible man. I drove my old truck into the city, parking 3 blocks away from the West Side Women's Clinic. I walked the rest of the way, entering through the service dock. Cohen had pulled strings. He knew the building manager. I wasn't on the payroll, but I had a badge and a mop bucket waiting for me on the 2nd floor. The clinic was a glass and steel tower, intimidating and sterile. I took the service elevator up. My heart was beating a steady rhythm against my ribs. This was it. This was where the lie would either be confirmed or exposed. I started mopping the hallway of the 3rd floor. Obstetrics and gynecology. The waiting room was filled with nervous couples and women with swollen bellies. I kept my head down, pushing the soapy water back and forth, making myself part of the furniture. I watched the elevator doors. At 10 o'clock sharp, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Marcus. "We are parking." She wouldn't let me come up. She said she wants to surprise me with the gender reveal later. She is coming up alone. I gripped the mop handle. Of course she was coming up alone. 5 minutes later, the elevator dinged. The doors slid open. And there she was. Tiffany stepped out. She looked like a movie star. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, a tight black dress that showed off her figure, and she was carrying a designer bag that cost more than my first tractor. She didn't look nervous. She looked bored. She walked past the reception desk for obstetrics. She didn't stop to check in. She didn't even look at the nurses. She walked straight past the waiting room full of pregnant women. I frowned. Where was she going? She turned the corner, her heels clicking loudly on the linoleum. I squeezed out my mop and followed, pushing my yellow bucket, keeping my distance. I looked like just another old man cleaning the floor. She didn't even glance at me. To her, people like me didn't exist. We were just obstacles to step around. She walked to the end of the hall and pressed the button for the secondary elevator. This elevator only went to the upper floors, the specialty floors. I watched the numbers light up as she ascended. 4, 5, 6. She got off on the 4th floor. I abandoned my bucket. I took the stairs, moving as fast as my 75-year-old knees would allow. I burst onto the 4th floor landing, breathing hard, and cracked the door open. The sign on the wall opposite the door read, "The Center for Aesthetic Perfection, Plastic Surgery, Dermatology, and Cosmetic Enhancements." I stared at the sign. A cold smile spread across my face. There were no babies on the 4th floor. There were no ultrasounds. There were only needles and knives. I stepped into the hallway, pulling a spray bottle and a rag from my pocket. I started wiping down the baseboards, inching closer to the glass doors of the clinic. Through the frosted glass, I saw Tiffany at the counter. She was laughing with the receptionist. She wasn't filling out insurance forms for a prenatal checkup. She was pointing at her lips. I moved closer, polishing a smudge on the glass door. "I have an appointment with Dr. Vane," I heard Tiffany say. "I need a top-up. My upper lip is deflating and the wedding is in 2 weeks. I need to look perfect." I stopped scrubbing. "A top-up. Oh, and I need to sign the waiver again," the receptionist said. "Just standard procedure. No pregnancy, no breastfeeding, no active infections." "Nope," Tiffany chirped. "Clear on all counts. Just fill me up." I felt a surge of triumph so strong it almost made me dizzy. There it was, the confession. She had just signed a legal document stating she wasn't pregnant because you cannot get fillers if you are carrying a child. It was a liability. She took the clipboard, signed it quickly, and handed it back. Then she disappeared into the back rooms. I needed that paper. Or I needed the receipt. I needed something physical. A recording was good, but a piece of paper with her signature on it was a bulletproof vest. I waited. I cleaned that hallway until it sparkled. I cleaned the water fountain. I cleaned the elevator buttons. 40 minutes passed. Finally, the door opened. Tiffany walked out. Her lips were swollen, red, and shiny. She was checking her reflection in her phone, admiring the work. She looked like a duck that had been punched in the mouth, but she clearly thought she looked gorgeous. She stopped at the reception desk to pay. "All done, miss." "Sinclair," the receptionist said. "That will be $800. Would you like a receipt?" "Just toss it," Tiffany said, tapping her credit card. Marcus's credit card on the terminal. "I don't need a paper trail. Just make sure the appointment reminder doesn't go to my fiancé's email." "Of course," the receptionist said. She printed the receipt, crumpled it up along with the carbon copy of the waiver Tiffany had signed, and tossed it into the small wastebasket under the desk. Tiffany put on her sunglasses, fluffed her hair, and strutted toward the elevator. She looked satisfied. She had her new car, her new lips, and she thought her secret was safe. She got on the elevator, and the doors closed. I didn't wait. I walked straight into the clinic. The receptionist looked up surprised to see a janitor she didn't recognize. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Trash collection, ma'am," I said, keeping my head down, mumbling into my chest. "Building management sent me. Special pickup." "Oh, okay," she said, distracted by her computer screen. "The bin is right there." I walked behind the desk. My heart was racing. I reached for the small metal bin. There, right on top, was the crumpled ball of paper. I didn't just take the paper, I took the whole bag. I tied it up, nodded at the receptionist, and walked out. I didn't stop until I was back in the stairwell. My hands were shaking as I untied the bag. I dug through the coffee cups and candy wrappers until I found it. I smoothed out the paper against the concrete wall. It was a receipt for 1.5 milliliter Juvederm Ultra. Date, today. Patient Tiffany Sinclair. And stapled to the back was the yellow carbon copy of the patient intake form. Question 4. Are you currently pregnant or breastfeeding? Tiffany had checked the box marked no, and right next to it, she had signed her name. I leaned against the wall and let out a long, ragged breath. I had it. I had the smoking gun. She wasn't just lying to Marcus. She was lying to everyone. There was no baby, there was no heir, there was only greed, vanity, and a syringe full of poison. I took a picture of the document with my phone, sending it immediately to Cohen and to Marcus. Then I folded the paper carefully and placed it in my pocket right next to my heart. It was time to go home. It was time to show Marcus that he wasn't trapped, he was free, and it was time to prepare the welcome party for the Sinclairs. I walked down the stairs, tossing the rest of the trash into the dumpster outside. I stripped off the blue scrubs and threw them in the back of my truck. I put my old cap back on. Isaiah Jefferson was back, and he was bringing the storm. The silence on the farm didn't last long. The Sinclairs were like kudzu. You could cut them back, hack them down, but they just kept creeping back in, looking for a chokehold. 2 days after I caught Tiffany at the clinic, the strategy changed. They stopped demanding. They stopped screaming. They started smiling. And that terrified me more than the anger ever did. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the white Range Rover rolled up the driveway again. This time there was no aggressive honking, no stomping of heels. Victoria Sinclair stepped out of the car carrying a wicker basket covered in a checkered cloth. She looked like she was auditioning for a role in a commercial for country living. She was wearing a floral dress that was trying too hard to be modest, and her face was plastered with a look of concern so thick you could scrape it off with a putty knife. Tiffany was with her looking bored but playing along, and Marcus was driving his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I was sitting on the porch, whittling a piece of cedar. I wasn't really making anything, just shaving the wood down, letting the shavings pile up around my boots. It calmed my nerves. It kept my hands busy so I wouldn't strangle anyone. "Good afternoon, Isaiah." Victoria called out, her voice dripping with syrup. "We thought we would come by and check on you. We brought some tea and biscuits, a little peace offering." I didn't stand up. I just tipped my cap. "That is mighty kind of you, ma'am," I said, keeping the drawl heavy. Marcus walked up the steps, his eyes darting around. He looked tired. The game was wearing on him. He gave me a quick, almost imperceptible nod. He knew something was coming. We just didn't know what. Victoria bustled into my kitchen like she owned it. I heard cabinets opening and closing. I heard the kettle whistle. She was making herself at home, invading my sanctuary. Tiffany sat on the porch swing, scrolling on her phone, ignoring me completely. She looked at the farm like it was a prison she was about to be paroled from. 10 minutes later, Victoria came out with a tray. There were 4 mugs. 3 of them were my regular coffee mugs. One was a delicate china teacup she must have brought from her own house. It looked ridiculous sitting on the rough wood of my porch table. "Here you go, Isaiah," she said, placing the china cup in front of me. "I made you a special blend, chamomile and valerian root. It is wonderful for the nerves. You have seemed so agitated lately. This will help you relax." She handed Marcus and Tiffany the coffee mugs. She took one for herself. I looked at the cup. The steam rising from it didn't smell like chamomile. I spent 40 years on construction sites. I spent 40 years working with chemical solvents, sealants, and bonding agents. My nose is sensitive. I can smell a gas leak from 3 floors down. And I can smell when something isn't right. There was a faint metallic acridness cutting through the herbal scent. It was subtle. If I had been just a farmer, I might have missed it. But I wasn't just a farmer. I was an engineer. I knew that smell. It smelled like benzodiazepines crushed into powder. It smelled like the sedatives we used to have to lock up in the site medical trailer. She wasn't trying to relax me. She was trying to knock me out. I looked up at Victoria. She was watching me. Her eyes were wide, expectant. She wasn't drinking her tea. She was waiting for me to take the first sip. "Go on," she urged. "It is best when it is hot." My mind raced. Why drug me? What was the endgame? Then I saw Tiffany lift her phone. She wasn't scrolling anymore. She was holding it up, the camera lens pointed directly at me. They didn't want to kill me. Not today. They wanted a show. They wanted footage of the old man passing out, slurring his words, acting crazy. They wanted evidence of incompetence. If I refused to drink, they would know I suspected them. If I accused them, they would deny it and call me paranoid, which would just feed their narrative. I had to play the game. I picked up the saucer with my trembling, calloused hands. I lifted the delicate cup. I saw Victoria's shoulders relax. She thought she had me. I brought the cup to my lips. I tilted it, but I didn't open my throat. I let the hot liquid pool in my mouth under my tongue. It tasted bitter, vile, like sucking on a battery. I lowered the cup. I coughed a racking, chest-deep cough that shook my whole body. "Excuse me," I wheezed. Went down the wrong pipe. I pulled my old blue handkerchief from the front pocket of my overalls. I hacked into it, burying my face in the fabric. And while my face was covered, I spit the poison into the cloth. I wiped my mouth, folding the handkerchief over the wet spot, and shoved it deep into my pocket. I looked at Victoria. I smiled a goofy, lopsided smile. "That is tasty," I said. "Real strong." She smiled back. "Good. Drink it all." I did it again. Sip, hold, cough, spit. It was a magic trick I had learned in boardrooms when I didn't want to get drunk with clients but needed them to think I was drinking. By the time the cup was empty, I started my performance. I let my eyelids droop. I let my head roll slightly to the side. I started tapping my fingers on the armrest in erratic, nonsensical rhythm. "I surely do feel heavy," I mumbled, slurring the words together. "Beatrice. Is that you, Beatrice?" I looked directly at Tiffany. "You look just like my Beatrice," I said, pointing a shaking finger at her. "Why are you wearing that white dress? We got to go to the church. The preacher is waiting." Tiffany recoiled, wrinkling her nose. "Ew, he thinks I'm his dead wife." "Mother, he is losing it." Victoria stood up. She moved closer to Tiffany, making sure the camera had a clear shot of my face. "Keep recording, Tiffany," Victoria whispered, loud enough for me to hear. "This is perfect." She stepped into my line of sight. "Isaiah." "It is Victoria." "Do you know where you are?" I looked around wildly. I stood up, swaying on my feet. I grabbed the porch railing to steady myself. "The foundation is cracking," I shouted, putting genuine panic into my voice. I saw the blueprints. "The steel is wrong. We gotta evacuate the building. The concrete ain't cured yet." It wasn't total nonsense. I was quoting a job from 1982. But to them, it sounded like the ramblings of a madman. Marcus stood up, looking alarmed. He started to move toward me, but Victoria put a hand on his chest, stopping him. "Don't interrupt him, Marcus," she hissed. "We need to see how bad this is. Look at him. He is hallucinating. He is aggressive." I stumbled forward, knocking the chair over. I spun around, swatting at invisible flies. "Get the rats out of the wall," I yelled. "They are eating the wiring, fire in the hole." I collapsed back onto the bench, panting, letting my eyes roll back in my head before focusing hazily on Marcus. "Who are you?" I asked him, letting a line of drool escape the corner of my mouth. "You look like the tax man." "I ain't paying no taxes on the rain." Victoria turned to the camera, her face a mask of tragic concern. "Did you get that?" she asked Tiffany. "Got it," Tiffany said, snapping the video off. "That was gold. He is totally gone." Victoria turned to Marcus. She put her hands on his shoulders, her voice dropping to a somber, serious tone. "See, Marcus? See what we have been trying to tell you. Your father isn't just eccentric. He is dangerous. He is living in the past. He is seeing things that aren't there. He thinks the house is falling down. He thinks you are the tax collector." She gestured to me, slumped on the bench, pretending to stare at a moth. He cannot live here alone anymore, Marcus. It is negligent. What if he turns the stove on and forgets? What if he gets a gun and thinks the mailman is a rat? We have to do the responsible thing. Marcus looked at me. I kept my face blank, my mouth slack. I prayed he understood the play. What do you mean? Marcus asked, his voice tight. We need to get him help, Victoria said firmly. There is a facility. Shady Pines. It is secure. They have doctors who specialize in this kind of rapid decline. We need to get emergency guardianship, Marcus. Today. We need to sign the papers to take control of the estate so we can pay for his care. It is the only way to save him. Guardianship. There it was, the keys to the kingdom. If they got guardianship, they controlled the trust. They controlled the land. They controlled me. They could lock me away in a room with padded walls and sell my life's work to the highest bidder. I felt a surge of cold fury so intense I almost broke character. They had poisoned me. They were standing on my porch drinking my coffee, planning to imprison me in my own body. Marcus looked down at the floor. He looked trapped. He looked like he was weighing the soul of his father against the demands of these harpies. I don't know, Marcus stammered. Maybe we should wait. Maybe it's just a bad day. A bad day, Tiffany scoffed. He just called me Beatrice and screamed about rats. He is cooked, Marcus. His brain is mush. If you don't sign the papers, you are letting him die. Do you want that on your conscience? Because I won't have it on mine. We are getting married in 3 days. I cannot have a crazy person at my wedding. He goes to the home or there is no wedding. That was the ultimatum. Me or her, the farm or the fake baby. Marcus looked at Tiffany. He looked at Victoria. Then he looked at me. Okay, Marcus whispered. Okay. You win. Call the lawyer. Let's get the papers drawn up. Victoria clapped her hands together, a sharp, violent sound. Excellent decision, darling. You are being so brave. I know a lawyer who can rush the emergency order. We can have it in front of a judge by tomorrow morning. She pulled out her phone, dialing a number as she walked down the steps. Tiffany followed her, smirking at me as she passed. Bye-bye, Grandpa, she whispered. Enjoy the pudding cups. They walked to the car, leaving Marcus standing on the porch. He didn't look at me. He just turned and walked down the steps, his shoulders hunched. I waited until the taillights of the Range Rover disappeared. I waited until the dust settled. Then I sat up. I wiped the drool from my chin. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the handkerchief. It was soaked with the tea. I walked into the house, straight to the kitchen. I found a Ziploc bag and sealed the handkerchief inside. Evidence. I labeled it with the date and time. Then I went to my study. I sat down at the desk and pulled up the security feed. I had installed hidden cameras on the porch 3 days ago. High definition. Audio enabled. I rewound the footage. There it was. Victoria pulling a small vial from her bra. Victoria pouring the powder into my cup. Victoria stirring it with her pinky finger. I watched myself act crazy. It was a good performance. But the camera angle caught something else. It caught Victoria's face when I was screaming about the fire. She wasn't scared. She was smiling, a shark-like predatory grin. I saved the clip. I backed it up to 3 different servers. Then I picked up the phone. Cohen, I said. Yeah. They drugged me. Cohen. They tried to roofie me on my own front porch. There was a silence on the line. A cold, heavy silence. Are you okay? Cohen asked. I didn't drink it, I said. I have the sample. And I have the video. They are filing for emergency guardianship tomorrow. Good, Cohen said. Let them file. Let them walk into the courtroom with their fake video and their lies. I want the judge to see this, Cohen. I want the judge to see them poisoning an old man. He will, Cohen promised. But Isaiah, yeah, if they are filing tomorrow, that means they are bringing the lawyer to you tonight. They need your signature on the voluntary admission forms first. It makes the guardianship easier. They are going to try to trick you into signing yourself away. I know, I said. Let them come. I hung up the phone. I looked at the Ziploc bag on my desk. They wanted to declare me incompetent. They wanted to take my mind. I opened the drawer and pulled out a pen, a nice heavy fountain pen. Tonight, the stinky country boy was going to sign his name, but he wasn't going to sign what they thought. I sat back and waited for the night to fall. The tea was bitter, but the revenge was going to be sweet. The moon was high and bright over the cornfields when the headlights cut through the darkness of my living room. I was sitting in my old recliner, the leather cracked and worn from years of use waiting. I had turned off the main lights, leaving only a single dim lamp burning in the corner. It cast long, dancing shadows across the floorboards. I practiced my breathing. Shallow, rattling. The breathing of a man whose mind was slipping away, whose lungs were too tired to push air. I let my jaw go slack. I let my hands tremble in my lap. I was not Isaiah Jefferson, the man who built skyscrapers. I was Zeke, the confused old farmer who had just been poisoned by his future in-laws. The heavy oak door didn't even get a knock. It just swung open. Preston Sinclair walked in first, filling the frame like a bloated toad in a tuxedo. He didn't wipe his feet. He stepped right onto my wife's braided rug with his muddy dress shoes, bringing the cold night air in with him. Behind him was a man I had never seen before. He was skinny, wearing a suit that was too shiny and a tie that was too wide. He carried a leather briefcase that looked brand new, like he had just bought it at a discount store an hour ago, and trailing behind them both was Marcus. My son looked like he was walking to the electric chair. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. He wouldn't look at me. He kept his gaze fixed on the floorboards, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Good, he was selling it. If he looked at me, he might break. Well, look at this! Preston boomed, his voice too loud for the small room. He is still out of it. Victoria's tea must have really done a number on him. Good thing we came when we did. He looks like he is about to expire right there in the chair. The skinny man stepped forward, sniffing the air like a rat smelling cheese. He looked around my modest living room with a sneer, his eyes lingering on the old photographs on the mantel, dismissing them as trash. "Is this him?" he asked, his voice high and reedy. "That is him," Preston said, waving a dismissive hand in my direction. "Isaiah Jefferson. Or what is left of him." I let out a low moan, shifting in the chair. I blinked rapidly, trying to focus my eyes on them, making sure they saw the confusion I was projecting. "Who is that?" I mumbled, my words thick and slurping. "Is that the sheriff? I didn't steal no chickens." Preston laughed, a bark of cruel amusement. "No, Zeke, it is not the sheriff. This is Mr. Sterling. He is a lawyer, a very important lawyer. He is here to help you." Mr. Sterling approached me, pulling a chair from the kitchen table and dragging it across the floor. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard. He sat down directly in front of me, opening his briefcase with a sharp click. He pulled out a thick stack of papers. They were crisp white and terrifying. Mr. Jefferson Sterling said, speaking slowly and loudly, as if I were deaf as well as stupid. "My name is Arthur Sterling. Your family is very concerned about your health. They tell me you have been seeing things. Fire, rats, is that right?" I nodded weakly, letting my head loll to the side. "The rats," I whispered. "They are in the walls, eating the wires." Sterling smiled, a thin, oily stretching of his lips. "Exactly. That is very dangerous. You cannot be here alone. You need someone to take care of you, someone to make decisions for you so you don't get hurt." He placed the papers on the small side table next to me. He uncapped a heavy, expensive-looking pen and held it out. "This is a power of attorney, Mr. Jefferson. It simply says that you are tired. It says that you want your son Marcus to handle the farm and the money while you rest. It says you trust him to do what is best. All you have to do is sign right here at the bottom." I looked at the pen. It hovered in the air in front of me. I looked at the paper. The text was dense, single-spaced, standard legal boilerplate. But I knew what it really said. It was a death warrant. It granted full, unrestricted power over my person and my estate. It gave them the right to sell my land, liquidate my accounts, and commit me to a facility against my will. It was total surrender. I looked up at Marcus. He was standing by the door, his back against the frame. He looked sick. "Marcus," I croaked. He stepped forward. He had to do this. He had to be the closer. "Dad," Marcus said, his voice trembling, "just sign it, please. I will take care of you. We just want you to be safe. You don't have to worry about the farm anymore. I will handle everything. Just sign the paper, and you can sleep." I saw the pain in his eyes. He hated saying those words. He hated being part of this charade, but he was doing it. He was playing the game we had agreed on. I looked back at Preston. He was practically vibrating with greed. He was staring at the paper like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Go on," Zeke Preston urged, tapping his watch. "We don't have all night. The facility is expecting you in the morning. Sign the damn paper." I reached out with a shaking hand. My fingers were gnarled, calloused from decades of laying brick and pouring concrete. I grasped the pen. I let it slip, fumbling it, almost dropping it on the floor. Sterling sighed, impatient. He grabbed my hand and repositioned the pen. Firm grip, Mr. Jefferson. Right on the line. I held the pen over the paper. The tip hovered inches from the signature line. I started to lower it. My hand was shaking violently, a tremor that rattled my whole arm. I was channeling every ounce of acting ability I had. I was the frail, broken old man they wanted to see. I can't see the line, I whined. It is too dark, Preston cursed under his breath. He pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight, shining the harsh white beam directly onto the paper, blinding me for a second. There, he snapped. Sign it. I took a deep breath. I let the tip of the pen touch the paper. I felt the texture of the document under my hand. This was it. The moment of truth. I started to write. But I didn't write Isaiah Jefferson. I didn't write Zeke. I let my hand jerk and spasm. I dragged the pen across the page in jagged, violent strokes. I was writing, but I was disguising the letters in the tremors of a dying mind. G. I made the letter big and looped, looking like a child's scrawl. E. The pen dug into the paper, almost tearing it. T. I paused, panting, letting the pen rest. You are doing great, Sterling said, his voice tight. Keep going. I started again. O. U-T. Get out. That was my signature. That was my legal declaration. That was my answer to their theft, their poison, and their arrogance. I finished the last letter with a trailing line that ran off the edge of the page like my hand had just given up. I dropped the pen. It rolled across the table and fell onto the floor. I slumped back into the recliner, closing my eyes, letting my mouth hang open again. I'm tired, I whispered. So tired. Sterling snatched the paper up before the ink was even dry. He didn't look closely. He didn't analyze the letters. He just saw ink on the line. He saw a scribbled mess that looked enough like the signature of a senile old man to pass muster with a crooked judge. He grinned, a look of pure avarice. We got it, he said to Preston. It is done. Preston let out a whoop of joy. He clapped Marcus on the back so hard I thought he would knock him over. Attaboy, Marcus. You did it. We are in business. The lithium is ours. The land is ours. He turned to me, lying limp in the chair. Thanks for the donation, Zeke, he sneered. Don't worry. Shady Pines has excellent oatmeal. You will love it there. He grabbed the briefcase from Sterling. Let's go. We need to file this first thing in the morning. I want the surveyor out here by noon. Marcus looked at me one last time. His eyes were wide, questioning. He hadn't seen what I wrote. He thought I had actually signed it. He looked terrified that the plan had gone wrong, that I had actually given up. I couldn't wink. I couldn't signal him. Not with Preston watching. I just lay there breathing my shallow, rattling breaths. Preston grabbed Marcus's arm. Come on, son. We have champagne waiting at the house. Victoria is dying to celebrate. They turned and marched out the door. Sterling followed, clutching his empty pen, leaving the one I had dropped on the floor. The door slammed shut, plunging the room back into silence and shadows. I listened to their footsteps on the porch. I heard the car doors slam. I heard the engine roar to life and tires crunch on gravel as they sped away into the night. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. I sat up. The tremors stopped. My breathing deepened. I reached down and picked up the expensive fountain pen from the floor. It was a Mont Blanc. Sterling had left a $500 pen on the floor of a farmhouse. That was how much they underestimated me. They threw away value because they were so focused on the bigger prize. I walked to the window and watched the red taillights fade into the distance. They were celebrating. They were popping champagne. They were probably already spending the money they thought they had just stolen. They had a piece of paper. But they didn't check it. They didn't look. They saw what they wanted to see. They saw surrender. Tomorrow morning they would walk into the county clerk's office. They would slap that paper down on the counter with a flourish. And the clerk, Mrs. Higgins, who I had gone to high school with, who knew my signature better than she knew her own husband's, was going to look at it. She was going to see "Get Out" scrawled in shaky black ink, and she was going to laugh. But that wasn't even the best part. The best part was that by the time they tried to file it, Cohen would already be there. Cohen would have the video of Victoria drugging my tea. Cohen would have the financial report, and Cohen would have a restraining order ready to serve. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water from the tap. It was cool and sweet. I washed the taste of the fake act out of my mouth. They wanted a signature. They got a warning. I went to the phone and dialed Cohen. "Did they come?" he asked immediately. "They came," I said. "Did you sign?" "I signed," I said, a smile spreading across my face in the darkness. "But I don't think they are going to like my penmanship." Cohen chuckled. "Get some sleep, Isaiah. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." I hung up. I wasn't tired. I felt energized. The first battle was won. They thought they had the keys to the castle, but all they had was a drawing of a key on a napkin. I went back to the recliner and sat down. I picked up Beatrice's Bible from the side table where I had left it. I opened it to the book of Psalms. "The wicked have drawn out the sword and have bent their bow to cast down the poor and needy. Their sword shall enter into their own heart." I closed the book. Amen. I turned off the lamp. The stinky country boy was done playing victim. Now it was time to play executioner. The morning sun was already baking the asphalt when Tiffany pulled her new G-Wagon up to the curb in the Bridal District. She didn't park. She just idled in the loading zone, checking her makeup in the rearview mirror while horns blared behind us. "Get out," she said without looking at me, "and try not to touch the door handle with those greasy fingers." I used my knuckle to pop the latch and stepped out onto the sidewalk. I was wearing my Sunday best again, the same polyester suit from the engagement party, because she had forbidden me from wearing my overalls in the city. It didn't matter. To her, I looked like trash whether I was in denim or discount wool. We were standing in front of a shop called the Gilded Lapel. The windows were dressed with mannequins wearing tuxedos that cost more than my first 3 cars combined. Gold lettering on the glass promised bespoke tailoring for the discerning gentleman. Tiffany marched to the door, her heels clicking a sharp, aggressive rhythm on the pavement. I followed a few paces behind, head down, shoulders hunched, playing the part of the obedient, simple-minded father. The moment we stepped inside, the air changed. It was cool, scented with cedar and expensive leather. A young man with slicked-back hair and a suit that fit him like a second skin looked up from a ledger. His eyes scanned Tiffany, lighting up at the sight of her designer bag and the diamond on her finger. Then his gaze slid to me. The light died, instantly replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated sneer. He didn't just look down on me. He looked through me as if I were a smudge on his pristine glass display case. "Can I help you, madam?" he asked, ignoring me completely. "Yes," Tiffany said, snapping her gum. "I need a suit for him." She jerked a thumb in my direction. The clerk wrinkled his nose. "For him?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "I am afraid we operate by appointment only, and our collections start at a price point that perhaps—" "Oh, stop it," Tiffany interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "I don't want your collection. I need the service package. You know, the rental stock you keep in the back for the catering staff, the waiters, the busboys." The clerk's eyebrows shot up. "Ah, I see. For the help." "Exactly," Tiffany said. "We are having a rustic-themed wedding, and we need the old gardener here to look presentable while he's holding the hors d'oeuvres tray. But don't give him anything nice. He will just ruin it. Get him the cheapest thing you have. The nylon blend. He is used to wearing burlap sacks, so anything soft will probably just confuse him." I stood there clutching my hat in my hands, staring at the polished marble floor. The humiliation was a physical weight pressing down on my chest. She wasn't just buying me a suit. She was buying me a costume. She was dressing the owner of the estate as a servant for her amusement. The clerk let out a short, cruel laugh. "Understood, madam. Right this way." He led us past the rows of Italian silk and cashmere, past the velvet smoking jackets, all the way to the back of the store. He opened a door that led to a cramped, dimly lit fitting room that smelled of mothballs and stale sweat. There was a rack of suits there that looked like they had died in the 1970s and been resurrected for a funeral no one wanted to attend. They were stiff, shiny, and ugly. "Here we are," the clerk said, pulling a jacket off the rack. It was a vomit-colored shade of beige. "This is our economy line. It is 100% synthetic, highly flammable but very durable." Tiffany laughed. "Perfect. Put it on Zeke, and hurry up. I have a nail appointment in an hour." I took the hanger. The fabric felt like plastic against my calloused fingertips. I stepped into the tiny changing cubicle and pulled the curtain shut. I stripped off my own jacket and shirt. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was lined with age and sun. My eyes were tired. But behind that fatigue, the fire was still burning. I put on the white shirt they gave me. It was scratchy and tight in the neck. I pulled on the beige trousers. They were too short, exposing my ankles. I buttoned the jacket. It pulled across my chest, restricting my movement. I looked like a clown. I looked like a man who had lost everything. I stepped out. Tiffany took one look at me and burst into laughter. She covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking. "Oh my God," she gasped. "You look ridiculous. It is perfect. You look exactly like the hired help. Mother is going to die when she sees this." The clerk smirked, leaning against the wall. "A perfect fit for a man of his station?" I stood there letting them laugh. I hung my head. "Does it have to be so tight, Miss Tiffany?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It itches something fierce." "That's the point, Zeke," she said, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. "It reminds you not to get comfortable. You are there to work, not to relax." Just then the bell above the front door chimed. It wasn't a gentle tinkle. It was a confident, authoritative ring. The air in the shop seemed to shift again, charged with a new energy. I heard heavy footsteps on the marble. The clerk straightened up immediately, smoothing his tie, his face transforming from arrogance to servile panic. "Mr. Thorne," he exclaimed, rushing toward the front of the shop. "What an honor! We weren't expecting you until next week for your fitting." I froze. Walter Thorne. The name hit me like a sledgehammer. Walter was the biggest commercial real estate developer in the tri-state area. He owned half the skyline in Atlanta, and 20 years ago when he was just starting out and nobody would give him a loan, I was the one who fronted him the capital to build his first shopping center. We had built an empire together side by side in hard hats and steel-toed boots. He called me boss. I called him kid. I hadn't seen him in 5 years, not since I retired to the farm. But I knew that walk. I knew that voice. I stepped out of the shadows of the back room, drawn by a force I couldn't control. I had to see him. Walter was standing in the center of the showroom. He looked older, grayer, but he still had the shoulders of a linebacker. He was wearing a suit that probably cost $10,000. He was inspecting a fabric swatch with a critical eye. Just passing through, Julian Walter boomed. His voice was deep and gravelly. "I wanted to check on the velvet for the gala. I don't want any mistakes this time." "Of course," Mr. Thorne, the clerk, stammered. "Right away." Tiffany, sensing an opportunity to rub elbows with genuine wealth, strutted forward. She left me standing in the back like a discarded prop. She put on her best smile, the one she used to snare husbands. "Oh, excuse me," she cooed, inserting herself into Walter's line of sight. "Are you Walter Thorne, the developer?" Walter looked down at her. He didn't smile. He looked at her like she was a bug on his windshield. "I am," he said simply. "I am Tiffany Sinclair," she said, extending her hand. "My father is Preston Sinclair. I think you run in the same circles." Walter didn't take her hand. "Sinclair," he repeated. The name sounded bad in his mouth. "I know the name. I heard about the bankruptcy filing in Florida. Tough break." Tiffany's smile faltered. Her face went pale. She pulled her hand back as if she had been burned. Yes. Well, reorganization. It is very strategic." "Strategic," Walter grunted. "Right." He looked past her. He looked toward the back of the shop. His eyes scanned the racks of cheap suits. And then they landed on me. I was standing there in my high-water pants and my plastic jacket looking like a scarecrow. Walter's eyes widened. His jaw dropped. He took a step forward, pushing past Tiffany. "Zeke," he breathed. He started to raise his hand. He started to smile. He was about to shout my name. He was about to come over and hug me and ask me why the hell I was dressed like a circus act. He was about to blow my cover wide open. I locked eyes with him. I kept my face stone cold. I raised one finger to my lips in a sharp, sudden motion. "Shh." Then I shook my head. Just once. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement. "Don't do it, Walter. Not now." Walter stopped. He was a smart man. You don't get to be a billionaire by being slow on the uptake. He saw the cheap suit. He saw the way Tiffany was looking at me with disgust. He saw the clerk sneering. He did the math in a split second. He stopped his forward momentum. He cleared his throat. He straightened his jacket. The smile vanished, replaced by the thunderous expression he used when a contractor tried to cheat him on concrete. He turned slowly to the clerk. "Julian." "Yes, Mr. Thorne," the clerk squeaked. "Who is that gentleman?" Walter asked, pointing a thick finger at me. The clerk scoffed. "Oh, him. Nobody, sir. Just some old gardener. This lady here is renting him a uniform for a wedding. We were just trying to find something disposable." Walter's face turned a shade of red that usually preceded an explosion. He walked up to the clerk. He towered over him. Disposable, Walter roared. The sound shook the glass in the windows. He turned to Tiffany. "And you put a man his age in polyester." In this heat, Tiffany blinked, confused. He is used to it. He likes it. He is simple." "Simple," Walter repeated. He looked at me again. He saw the dignity I was fighting to maintain. He saw his old mentor standing there being treated like livestock. Walter turned back to the clerk. His voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "You listen to me, you little weasel. You are going to take that jacket off him. You are going to measure him properly. You are going to go into the back to the vault and you are going to get the Italian wool blend I ordered for myself last month, the charcoal gray, and you are going to fit it to him. But Mr. Thorne," the clerk stammered, "that suit is $5,000. This lady asked for the cheapest. I don't care what she asked for," Walter shouted. "I am telling you what to do. You treat this man with the respect he deserves. You offer him a water. You offer him a chair. You fix that hem so it doesn't look like he is wading in a flood." He leaned in close to the clerk's face. "If I see him walk out of here looking like anything less than a king, I will buy this building by the end of the business day. I will evict this store. I will burn the inventory, and I will make sure you never sell so much as a pair of socks in this town again. Do you understand me?" The clerk was trembling. "Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Thorne. Right away." Walter turned to Tiffany. She was staring at him with her mouth open, completely bewildered. "And you?" Walter said, looking her up and down with open contempt. "You should be ashamed of yourself. Treating an elder like a prop, it is disgusting. Money doesn't buy class, lady. And clearly you have neither." He looked at me one last time. He gave me a barely perceptible wink. Then he turned and marched out of the store, slamming the door so hard the bell fell off the hook. Silence descended on the shop. The clerk looked at me with terror in his eyes. "Right this way, sir," he whispered, rushing over to help me out of the beige jacket. "Let me get you something cool to drink. Please sit down." I sat in the leather chair. I let him bring me a bottle of sparkling water. I let him measure my inseam with trembling hands. Tiffany stood by the counter fuming. She looked at the door where Walter had exited. She looked at me sitting in the VIP chair. She let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "Unbelievable," she muttered, shaking her head. "Did you see that? He must be senile too. Or just a bleeding heart liberal." She glared at me. "Don't get used to it, Zeke," she spat. "He just pities you. He sees a pathetic old man and feels guilty about his millions. It is charity. That is all it is. Society is going crazy. The poor are treated like kings, and the people who actually matter are treated like villains." I took a sip of the sparkling water. It was crisp and cold. "Yes, ma'am," I said softly. "It surely is a strange world." I looked at my reflection in the mirror as the clerk draped the charcoal Italian wool over my shoulders. It was soft. It was light. It fit like armor. Walter had understood. He had played his part. And now I had a suit worthy of the funeral I was about to host. "Enjoy the charity, Tiffany," I thought, "because the bill is coming due, and you are not going to be able to pay it." It was late afternoon when the shadows started to stretch long across the porch, and I made the mistake of taking the velvet box out of my pocket. I usually kept it locked in the safe in the study, buried behind 3 inches of steel and a complex digital code, but today was the anniversary of the day I proposed to Beatrice. 50 years ago, I had knelt in the red dirt of a job site, my hands covered in brick dust, and offered her this ring. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a promise. It was a 3-carat old European cut diamond that I had saved for 5 years to buy. It was the only things of real value I owned back then, and Beatrice had worn it every single day until her fingers grew too thin in the hospital. I was sitting in the rocking chair, polishing the gold band with a soft cloth lost in the memory of her laugh when the screen door slammed open. I didn't move fast enough to hide it. The sunlight caught the facets of the diamond, sending a prism of light dancing across the peeling paint of the porch ceiling. Tiffany stopped dead in her tracks. Her eyes, usually cold and calculating, widened with a feral hunger. She stared at the ring like a starving wolf staring at a lamb. She didn't look at me. She didn't say hello. She just walked straight toward me, her hand outstretched, her fingers twitching. "Oh my God," she breathed, her voice hushed with greed. "Is that real?" I closed my hand over the ring, extinguishing the light. "It is real enough," I said, keeping my voice flat. "It belonged to my wife." Tiffany dropped to her knees beside my chair. She wasn't kneeling in reverence. She was kneeling to get closer to the prize. She pried at my fingers with her manicured claws. "Let me see it, Zeke." Open your hand." I opened my hand slowly. The diamond sat there heavy and brilliant, mocking the cheap surroundings she thought I lived in. Tiffany gasped. That is at least 3 carats. The clarity is perfect. It must be worth $50,000, maybe more." She looked up at me and her expression changed. It shifted from greed to entitlement. A smile curled her lips, the kind of smile a predator gives before the bite. "It is beautiful, Zeke," she cooed. "And it is perfect. It is exactly what I need." "What you need?" I asked, pulling my hand back. "For the wedding," she said, standing up and brushing the dust off her knees. "It is tradition. Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. This is my something old. And honestly, Zeke, it is my right. I am marrying the eldest son. I am the matriarch of the next generation. The family jewels pass to the oldest daughter-in-law. That is how it works in civilized families. Civilized families." The irony almost made me laugh. This woman who had lied about a pregnancy, who was currently plotting to put me in an asylum, was lecturing me on family tradition. I shook my head slowly. "No, ma'am. This ring stays with me. It ain't passing to nobody. Beatrice said it goes to the ground with me, or it goes to a woman who knows what it means to build a home from nothing." Tiffany's face hardened. Her eyes narrowed into slits. "Are you saying I don't know how to build a home? I am planning the wedding of the century. I am elevating this family, and you are going to deny me my birthright because of some sentimental nonsense." "It ain't nonsense," I said, slipping the ring back into the velvet box and shoving it deep into the pocket of my overalls. "It is a no." Tiffany stomped her foot. A literal stomp, like a toddler who had been denied candy. "You are so selfish," she screamed. "You are a hoarding, selfish old man. What are you going to do with it? Let it rot in your pocket. It deserves to be seen. It deserves to be on a hand that gets manicures, not whatever this is." She gestured at the farm at the dirt at me. "Give it to me, Zeke, now, or I will tell Marcus you stole it. I will tell everyone you stole it from your wife's estate, and you are hiding assets." I stood up. I looked down at her. "Go ahead," I said. "Tell him. Tell the sheriff. But you ain't getting this ring." I walked past her into the house and locked the door behind me. I heard her scream in frustration outside, a high, piercing shriek that rattled the windows. Then I heard her phone dial. She was calling reinforcements. I knew what was coming. Greed is a powerful motivator, but desperation is stronger. And the Sinclairs were desperate. They saw $50,000 sitting in an old man's pocket, and they saw a lifeline. That night I didn't sleep in my bedroom. I made a show of going to bed early. I walked around the house, turning off the lights at 9 o'clock. I went into my bedroom, pulled the shades, and fluffed the pillows under the quilt to make it look like a sleeping body. Then I slipped out the side door and went to the study. My study has a separate ventilation system and soundproofing I installed myself. It also has a bank of monitors connected to the internal security cameras I had upgraded just last week. Night vision, motion sensors, the works. I sat in my leather chair, a mug of black coffee in my hand, and I watched the screens. At 2 in the morning, the back door handle jiggled. I hadn't locked it. I wanted them to get in. I wanted them to commit the crime. The door creaked open. 2 figures slipped into the kitchen. They were dressed in black like cat burglars from a bad movie. But they weren't graceful. The first figure tripped over the door jamb and cursed loudly. "Shh, you idiot. You will wake him up." It was Victoria. And stumbling behind her, looking terrified and sweating profusely, was Preston. I leaned forward, turning up the volume on the monitor. The image was crisp in the green glow of the night vision. They looked ridiculous. Victoria was wearing a black tracksuit that was too tight, and Preston had pulled a ski mask halfway down his face, but he had forgotten to cut holes for his mouth, so he kept pulling it up to breathe. They crept through the kitchen and into the hallway. They bypassed the living room. They went straight for my bedroom. "This is it," Victoria whispered, pointing at my door. "He keeps it in his pocket during the day. At night, he probably puts it on the nightstand or in the top drawer. You go in. Grab it." "Me," Preston hissed. "Why me? You are the one who wants the money." "Because you are the man, Preston. Do something useful for once. If he wakes up, just sit on him or something. He is frail." I snorted into my coffee. Frail. If I wanted to, I could have walked in there and snapped Preston like a twig. I watched on the bedroom camera as the door eased open. They crept inside. They tiptoed toward the bed where the pile of pillows lay under the quilt. Preston reached for the nightstand. He opened the drawer slowly. He rummaged around. Nothing, he whispered. Just dentures and some cough drops. Check the dresser, Victoria commanded from the doorway. Preston moved to the dresser. He started opening drawers. And this was the part that made my blood boil. He wasn't just looking. He was violating. He dug his hands into my clothes. He pulled out my socks, my undershirts. He pulled out my old faded boxer shorts and shook them looking for the ring. Gross, he muttered, tossing my underwear on the floor. This place smells like Old Spice and poverty. Keep looking, Victoria hissed. It has to be here. Check under the mattress. Preston walked to the bed. He grabbed the edge of the mattress and heaved. The lump under the covers. The pillows shifted and fell to the floor. Preston froze. He stared at the empty bed. He is not here, Preston squeaked. Victoria, he is not in the bed. What? Victoria rushed into the room. She stared at the pile of pillows. Where is he? Is he in the bathroom? Is he watching us? They spun around, scanning the dark corners of the room. Their eyes were wide with panic. They realized suddenly that they were in a stranger's house in the middle of the night, and the stranger was missing. Let's go, Preston whimpered. We have to go. This feels like a trap. Victoria didn't want to leave. She started ripping through the closet, throwing my Sunday suits on the floor, kicking my boots. I know he has it. We need that ring, Preston. We can pawn it tomorrow. It pays the mortgage for 3 months. She was frantic, tearing the room apart like a raccoon in a dumpster. It was pathetic. It was disgusting. These people who claimed to be high society, who turned their noses up at my garden, were rifling through an old man's laundry in the dark, desperate for a rock they didn't earn. Finally, a dog barked in the distance. It was my neighbor's hound miles away, but it spooked them. Run, Preston yelled. They scrambled out of the room, tripping over each other in the hallway. They burst out the back door and ran across the yard toward the woods where they must have parked their car. I sat in the study and watched them go. I didn't call the police, not yet. The video footage was saved. The break-in was documented. But the humiliation, that was just beginning. I slept on the leather sofa in the study for a few hours. When the sun came up, I went to the barn. I whistled. Duke. Here, boy. My dog. Duke came bounding out of the hayloft. He was a Great Pyrenees, 120 pounds of white fluff and muscle. He was a working dog, a guardian of livestock. He smelled like hay and dog, and he was the most loyal creature on earth. I knelt down and hugged his massive neck. Good boy, Duke. You want a new collar? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the velvet box. I took out the diamond ring. I had a piece of sturdy leather cord in my other pocket. I threaded the ring onto the leather, tying it securely with a knot that would hold a boat to a dock. Then I tied the cord around Duke's neck, letting the diamond rest right in the center of his thick white fur, sparkling like a star. It looked ridiculous. It looked perfect. Come on, Duke, I said. Let's go get some breakfast. We walked up to the house. I went into the kitchen and started frying bacon. I made coffee. I made biscuits. I made enough noise to wake the dead. Around 9 o'clock, the Range Rover pulled up again. They were back. They probably hadn't slept. They looked haggard, wearing sunglasses to hide the bags under their eyes. Tiffany was with them this time. They walked into the kitchen without knocking. They looked around nervously, checking to see if I was angry, if I knew. I was sitting at the table eating a biscuit. Morning, I chirped, cheerful as a bird. You folks are up early. Want some bacon? Preston looked at me, then at the bedroom door, then back at me. He looked confused. He didn't know if I had been there last night or not. We just came to apologize for yesterday, Tiffany said, her voice tight. About the ring. I was emotional. It is the wedding stress. I waved a hand. Water under the bridge, darlin'. Sit down. They sat. They looked around. They were scanning the room, looking for the velvet box. Suddenly, Duke trotted into the kitchen. He went straight to Tiffany and nudged her leg with his wet nose, hoping for a scrap of bacon. Tiffany recoiled. Ugh, get away, you beast. Get this dirty dog away from me. Then she saw it. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window and hit the diamond around Duke's neck. It flashed a blinding beam of light right into her eyes. She froze. Her mouth dropped open. She stared at the dog's neck. Is that the ring?" she whispered. I took a sip of coffee. I looked at the dog. I smiled. Yep, I said casually. That's Beatrice's ring. You put it on the dog, Tiffany screeched. She stood up, knocking her chair over. You put a $50,000 heirloom on a filthy animal. I leaned back in my chair. Well, Miss Tiffany, I surely did. You see, I had a bad dream last night. Dreamt there were rats in the house. Big two-legged rats rummaging through my drawers, stealing my underwear. It felt so real. I looked directly at Preston. He turned pale. He started coughing, choking on his own spit. So I figured. I continued. Beatrice hated thieves. She surely did despise a liar and a thief. And Duke here? He is the best security system I got. He sleeps light, and he has a jaw pressure of 500 pounds. Anyone tries to take that ring off his neck without permission, well, they might lose a hand. I patted Duke's massive head. He wagged his tail, the diamond swinging back and forth. I figure it is safer with the dog than it is in the house, I said. Don't you agree, Preston? Preston wouldn't meet my eyes. He just nodded, sweat beading on his forehead. Safe. Yes. Very safe. Tiffany looked like she was going to have a stroke. Her face turned purple. She reached for the dog, then pulled back when Duke let out a low warning rumble. This is insanity, she screamed. You are mocking me. You are mocking this family. No, ma'am, I said, standing up and clearing my plate. I am just protecting my assets. Now, if you will excuse me, Duke and I have to go check the perimeter. Lots of rats around lately. Big ones. I walked out the back door, Duke trotting happily at my side, the diamond glittering in the sun. I heard Tiffany screaming inside the house. I heard things breaking. Let her scream. The ring was safe. The trap was set. And the stinky country boy was having a hell of a good time. The storm clouds were gathering over the farm, heavy and purple, matching the feeling in my gut. It was 2 days before the wedding. The Sinclairs had turned my property into a construction zone of their own making. Tents were going up in the pasture. A dance floor was being laid over the grass I had spent 40 years tending. They were moving fast, fueled by the arrogance of people who think they have already won. They thought the power of attorney was signed. They thought I was a drooling vegetable. And they thought Marcus was their obedient puppy ready to sign the deed over the moment the preacher said amen. But the real storm wasn't outside. It was brewing in this guest cottage at the Sinclairs' rented estate in town. I was in the barn sharpening the blades on the bush hog when I saw Marcus's truck come flying up the driveway. He was driving too fast. The tires kicked up gravel as he skidded to a halt near the machine shed. He didn't park. He just killed the engine and sat there. I put down the file. I wiped my hands on a rag. I walked out into the humid afternoon air. Marcus didn't get out. I walked up to the driver's side window. He was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. His head was bowed, his forehead resting on the leather. His shoulders were shaking. I opened the door. Son, I said softly. He looked up at me, and what I saw broke my heart. My boy, a grown man of 35, looked like he had been hollowed out. His eyes were red, swollen, and filled with a pain so raw it was hard to look at. He wasn't just sad. He was destroyed. She never loved me, Dad, he whispered. Not for 1 second. I reached in and unbuckled his seatbelt. Come on, I said, get out of the truck. He stumbled out, his legs heavy. He looked like a man who had been in a car wreck. I guided him into the cool shadows of the barn, sitting him down on a stack of feed sacks. I handed him a bottle of water from the mini fridge I kept out there. Drink, I ordered. Then talk. Marcus took a sip. He took a deep, shuddering breath. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. His hands were trembling so badly he almost dropped it. I went to see her, he said, his voice cracking. I went to the rental house. I wanted to... I don't know. I wanted to believe her. Even after everything, Dad, even after the clinic, a part of me wanted to believe that maybe she cared. Maybe the baby lie was just panic. Maybe she really loved me. I nodded. Hope is a dangerous thing, son. It makes you blind. She wasn't in the main house, Marcus continued. The maid said she was in the pool house taking a nap. I wanted to surprise her. I had flowers. God, I feel so stupid. I had flowers. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. I walked up to the pool house. The door was open a crack to let the breeze in. I was about to knock. I was about to call her name. And then I heard her laughing. It wasn't the laugh she uses with me. It wasn't that fake, polite giggle. It was a dirty, low laugh. He tapped the screen of his phone. I recorded it, Dad. Just like you taught me. I stood there by the door and I recorded my own execution. He pressed play. The sound was clear. The audio cut through the quiet barn like a razor blade. It was Tiffany's voice. She sounded relaxed, happy. Oh, stop it, Jax, she was saying. You are making me sweat and I just got my spray tan done, a man's voice answered, deep arrogant, probably the personal trainer I had seen on her Instagram. Come on, Tiff, 2 more days, then you are a married woman. You are going to forget all about me. Forget you? Tiffany laughed again. Are you kidding? You are my reward, babe. This wedding, it is just a business transaction. I am marrying a bank account, not a man. Marcus flinched at the sound of her voice. I put a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. The recording continued. But the guy... Marcus right? The trainer asked. Is he that bad? Bad Tiffany snorted. He is pathetic. He is a golden retriever in a suit. He follows me around with these big, sad eyes, asking if I need water, if I need a pillow. It is exhausting. He kisses the ground I walk on. He actually thinks I am his soulmate. It takes everything I have not to vomit when he touches me. I felt Marcus tense under my hand. And the family, the man asked. The old man. Don't get me started on the hillbilly, Tiffany spat. The old man is practically dead already. We tricked him into signing power of attorney last night. He is going straight to a nursing home on Monday morning, the cheapest one we can find. I am not wasting good money on a vegetable. And the land sold, Tiffany said. We already have a buyer lined up, $20 million for the lithium rights. As soon as the ink is dry on the marriage license, I am going to convince Marcus to sell. It won't be hard. I will tell him it is for the baby's future. I heard a rustling sound on the recording. Speaking of the baby, Tiffany said, her voice muffled. Help me get this thing off. It is itching like crazy. What thing? The man asked. The belly, you idiot. The silicone bump. I have to wear it when I am around him. It is hot and sticky and I hate it. God, pretending to be pregnant is the hardest work I have ever done. I deserve an Oscar. There was a sound of Velcro ripping, a sigh of relief. There, she said. Much better. Pour me a drink, Jax. A double. I have to go have dinner with the in-laws later and pretend to be a glowing mother-to-be. And after the wedding, the man asked. Bali Tiffany purred. We sell the dirt. We pay off my parents' debts, so they stop nagging me. I stay married to the idiot for 6 months to make it look legit. Then, oops, irreconcilable differences. I take half the cash plus alimony and I meet you in Bali. First class, no more farms, no more smelly old men. Just you, me, and $10 million. The recording ended. Silence filled the barn. The only sound was the wind rattling the tin roof. Marcus dropped the phone onto the hay bale. He put his head back in his hands and started to sob. It wasn't a quiet cry. It was the deep guttural sound of a man whose soul has been ripped out. She called me pathetic, Dad, he choked out. She called me a golden retriever. She is going to divorce me before we are even married. There is no baby. There never was. I bought a crib, Dad. I painted the nursery. I picked out names. I let him cry. I stood there silent as a stone and let him bleed out the pain. He needed to feel it. He needed to feel every ounce of the betrayal, every sharp edge of the humiliation. Because pain burns, and fire cleanses. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. When his sobs turned into ragged breathing, I moved. I walked over to the workbench. I picked up a heavy wrench. I weighed it in my hand. Then I threw it against the metal wall of the barn. Clang! The sound was deafening. Marcus jumped startled out of his misery. He looked up at me, eyes wide. Are you done? I asked. My voice wasn't gentle anymore. It was hard. It was the voice of the man who ran construction crews, who fired men for being lazy, who built an empire from mud. Marcus blinked. What I asked if you are done crying, I said, stepping closer, because I don't have time for tears. And neither do you. I pointed a finger at his face. She called you pathetic. Is she right? Marcus stared at me. No, I can't hear you, I roared. Is she right? Are you a pathetic dog who rolls over when he is kicked? Are you a Mark? Or are you a Jefferson? I am a Jefferson, Marcus said, his voice gaining a little strength. Then stand up, I shouted. Marcus stood up. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He looked shaky, but he was standing. She didn't just break your heart, son, I said, getting right in his face. She spit on your name. She spit on your mother's memory. She planned to lock your father in a cage and steal the land your ancestors died for. She laughed about it. She is drinking vodka right now, laughing at you. I saw the change happen. It was slow at first, then all at once. The sadness in Marcus's eyes hardened into something else, something cold, something dangerous. She called me an idiot, Marcus whispered. Yes, she did, I said. She thinks you are stupid. She thinks you are weak. She thinks she has already won. I picked up his phone from the hay bale. I held it out to him. You have the weapon, Marcus. You have the confession. You have the proof. Now what are you going to do with it? Are you going to go home and cry in your pillow? Or are you going to make her pay? Marcus took the phone. His grip was tight. I want to destroy her, he said. Good, I said. I put my arm around his shoulders. It wasn't a hug for comfort. It was a huddle for war. Cry time is over, I told him. You mourn the relationship later. Right now, we have work to do. She wants a wedding. We are going to give her a wedding. She wants a show. We are going to give her the greatest show on earth. But Dad, Marcus said, looking at the phone. She wants to sell the land. Let her think she can, I said. Let her walk down that aisle thinking she is minutes away from being a millionaire. Let her say the vows. Let her think she has trapped you. Why, Marcus asked. Because the fall is harder from the top, I said. We are going to let her climb all the way up the ladder. And then right when she reaches for the prize, we are going to kick it out from under her. I walked over to the wall where I kept the blueprints. I pulled down the map of the farm. Tomorrow is the rehearsal dinner, I said. She wants me to serve drinks, I will serve drinks. She wants you to be the doting fiancé. You be the doting fiancé. You smile. You kiss her cheek. You tell her you can't wait to be a father. You make her feel like the smartest predator in the jungle. And then Marcus asked. And then I said, a grin spreading across my face that didn't reach my eyes. Then we invite some friends. I looked at Marcus. Do you trust me, son, with my life, Dad? Then go wash your face, I said. Put your suit back on. Go back to that house. And when you look at her, don't see the woman you loved. See the enemy. Because the hunting season just opened, and we are going to mount a trophy on the wall. Marcus nodded. He took a deep breath. He stood taller. The ghost was gone. The man was back. He walked out of the barn and got into his truck. He didn't slam the door, he closed it firmly. He started the engine and drove back toward the lion's den. I watched him go. I felt a fierce pride burn in my chest. They had tried to break my boy, but they had just forged him into steel. I turned back to the dark barn. Okay, Tiffany, I whispered to the empty air. You want to go to Bali? I picked up the wrench again. I am going to send you straight to hell, and I am going to enjoy every second of the trip. The invasion began at dawn, a cavalcade of rental trucks and underpaid workers descending on my property like locusts. The Sinclairs had decided to host the wedding right here on the farm. Tiffany had spun it to her friends as a return to authentic roots, a rustic chic extravaganza under the stars. She posted photos of the old barn on social media with captions about heritage and legacy. But I knew the truth. I knew what the financial report in my safe said. They were holding the wedding in my backyard because they could not afford to rent a venue. Every credit card had been declined. Every line of credit was frozen. My dirt was the only free option left. I watched from the kitchen window as they tried to transform my working farm into a fantasy. It was insulting. They didn't want the farm as it was. They wanted a sanitized plastic version of it. Victoria was marching around in her heels, barking orders at a team of men who were rolling out sheets of artificial turf over my grass. She wanted green, but she didn't want the bugs or the uneven ground that came with nature. She wanted a carpet. Tiffany was right behind her, directing the placement of white wicker furniture and thousands of dollars worth of imported flowers. It was absurd. She was covering up the smell of honest earth with the stench of hothouse lilies. They were wrapping my rough-hewn fence posts in silk ribbons, trying to dress up a wolf in sheep's clothing. I put on my green jumpsuit, the staff uniform they had forced on me, and walked out onto the porch. I had a job to do. I had to play the part of the silent, obedient servant one last time. Victoria spotted me immediately. She didn't say good morning. She pointed a finger at a pile of trash near the gate. "Zeke," she shouted, "move that debris behind the shed, and try not to drag your feet. We have caterers arriving in an hour, and I do not want them seeing you looking like a vagrant." I nodded, keeping my head down. "Yes, ma'am, right away." I walked over to the pile. It was mostly cardboard boxes from the decorations they had unpacked. As I bent down to gather them, a gust of wind caught a piece of heavy cream cardstock that had been discarded on top of the heap. It fluttered across the grass and landed at my feet. It was a wedding invitation. It was beautiful, I had to admit. Thick paper gold embossed lettering, elegant calligraphy. It looked expensive. It looked like legitimacy. The honor of your presence is requested at the marriage of Tiffany Sinclair and Marcus Jefferson. I picked it up intending to throw it in the trash bag with the rest of the refuse. But then I felt something on the back. A small separate card inserted into the envelope. An instruction card for the guests. I pulled it out. I adjusted my glasses, squinting against the morning sun. I read the text. And then I read it again, just to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. Important guest information. To ensure the comfort and health of all attendees, we kindly ask that you refrain from interacting with the resident groundskeeper, the groom's father. Due to ongoing hygiene concerns and cognitive decline, he is not to be approached or engaged in conversation. Security will be on hand to assist. The air left my lungs in a rush. Hygiene concerns. They had printed it. They had put it in ink. They had sent this card to 300 of the state's most influential people. Senators, judges, business tycoons. They had told the world that Isaiah Jefferson, the man who had built half the city they lived in, was a dirty, senile hazard that needed to be avoided like a contagious disease. I looked up at Victoria and Tiffany. They were laughing near the altar they were building, clinking glasses of mimosa, completely unaware that I was holding their death warrant in my hands. My throat didn't tighten this time. My eyes didn't sting. Instead, a low, rumbling laugh bubbled up from my chest. It started soft, a chuckle that shook my shoulders, and then it grew. I laughed until I had to lean against the fence post for support. It was perfect. It was absolutely, undeniably perfect. They had just handed me the final weapon. They had documented their cruelty. They had proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that their disdain wasn't just a private family matter. It was a public policy. I folded the card carefully. I didn't throw it away. I put it in the breast pocket of my green jumpsuit right next to my heart. I finished moving the trash, whistling a tune as I worked. I carried the bags behind the shed out of sight. Once I was alone, I pulled out my burner phone. The signal was strong out here. I dialed a number I knew better than my own social security number. "Cohen," I said when he answered. "Isaiah. You sound cheerful." "I am Cohen. I truly am. I just received my invitation to the wedding." Cohen paused. "They invited you?" "Oh, not exactly," I said, my voice hardening. "They sent out a warning label. Apparently I am a biohazard. They told the guests not to touch me." I heard Cohen inhale sharply. "They put that in writing." "On cardstock," I confirmed. "Gold embossed." There was a moment of silence, the kind of silence where you can hear a lawyer sharpening his knives. "What do you want to do?" Cohen asked. I looked toward the house where my son Marcus was walking out onto the porch, looking defeated and tired as Tiffany scolded him about his tie. I looked at the land my wife and I had bought with blood and sweat. "Activate Clause 7, I said. "Clause 7. Cohen's voice dropped an octave. "Isaiah, are you sure that is the nuclear option? That exposes everything. The trust, the shell companies, the offshore holdings. Once you pull that trigger, there is no going back to being Zeke. Isaiah Jefferson returns from the dead. I am ready to be resurrected," I said. "Activate it. Unseal the records. Transfer the titles back to my personal name, effective immediately. I want every single asset visible. I want them to see exactly what they tried to steal." "Done," Cohen said. "It will be processed by close of business today." "Anything else?" "Yes," I said. I looked at the empty chairs set up on the lawn. 300 chairs for guests who thought I was a dirty secret. "I want you to make some calls, Cohen. I want you to call the board of directors of Jefferson Construction Group. I want you to call the mayor. I want you to call the governor. The governor. He owes me a favor for that bridge project in Savannah," I said. "Call him. Tell them the chairman is hosting a private event. Tell them it is a celebration of transparency. Tell them attendance is mandatory." "You want the board at the wedding?" Cohen asked, sounding delighted. "I want everyone there," I said. "I want every man and woman who knows who I really am to be standing on this lawn tomorrow. I want the Sinclairs to see the difference between perceived power and real power." And Cohen, "Yeah, tell them to dress for a wedding, but tell them to bring their business cards. We might have some property to liquidate very quickly." I hung up the phone. I walked back out from behind the shed. Victoria was waiting for me, hands on her hips. "What took you so long?" she snapped. "The caterers are here. Go help them unload the truck, and don't talk to them. Just lift the boxes." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who thought she was the queen of my castle. "Yes, ma'am," I said, giving her a small, submissive bow. "Just doing my job." I walked toward the catering truck. I lifted crates of champagne and caviar. I carried them into the kitchen of my own house, setting them down on the granite countertops I had installed 10 years ago. I worked all day. I sweated. I got dirt on my uniform. I let them order me around. I let Tiffany sneer at me. I let Marcus look at me with apologetic eyes, knowing he couldn't break cover yet. But inside, I was soaring. Clause 7 was active. The gears of my empire were turning grinding into motion after a decade of silence. The invitations were going out. The titans of industry men who moved mountains with a signature were clearing their schedules. They were coming to see their old boss. They were coming to see Isaiah Jefferson. And tomorrow, when the music started and the bride walked down the aisle, she wasn't going to be met by a senile gardener. She was going to be met by the chairman of the board. I walked out to the barn as the sun set, the sky turning a bruised purple. I sat on a hay bale and took out the invitation card again. "Do not interact with the groundskeeper." I laughed again, the sound echoing in the empty rafters. "Oh, Tiffany, you should have touched the gardener. You might have felt the steel underneath the skin. Tomorrow the world was going to flip upside down, and I was going to be the one spinning the globe." The sun had gone down, but the heat of the Georgia night was still rising from the red clay trapped under the canopy of the massive white tent the Sinclairs had erected in my south pasture. It was the night of the rehearsal dinner. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumed citronella candles and the roasted pig that was currently spinning on a spit near the barn. They called it a southern soiree. I called it a circus. I was standing near the catering truck trying to stay invisible in my green polyester jumpsuit when Tiffany materialized out of the shadows. She was wearing a white cocktail dress that looked like it was made of spun sugar, and her face was tight with stress. "Zeke," she snapped, her voice low and sharp. "We have a problem. One of the servers called in sick, probably hungover. I need hands on the floor." I looked at her, adjusting my cap. "I ain't no waiter, Miss Tiffany. I'm the groundskeeper. I don't care what you are," she hissed, shoving a silver tray into my chest. "Tonight you are whatever I tell you to be. Take this. It is the signature cocktail, the Georgia Peach Bellini. Walk around, offer them to the guests, and for God's sake, try not to breathe on anyone." She loaded the heavy silver tray with crystal flutes filled with orange liquid. It weighed about 20 pounds. My arthritis flared in my wrists, but I took it. I took it because every humiliation was a deposit in the bank of my revenge, and I was about to cash out with interest. I walked into the tent. The noise was deafening. Laughter, clinking glasses, a jazz band playing in the corner. The guests were the same crowd from the engagement party, plus a few more local dignitaries the Sinclairs were trying to impress. I moved through the crowd like a ghost. I offered drinks. Most people didn't even look at me. They just took the glass from the floating tray, their eyes never leaving their conversation partners. To them, I was just a pair of hands in a green suit. I made my way toward the center of the tent where Victoria Sinclair was holding court. She was sitting on a high-backed wicker chair like a queen on a throne, surrounded by a group of women who looked like they shared the same plastic surgeon. Victoria was wearing a vintage Valentino gown. It was silver floor-length and shimmered under the string lights. It was magnificent, and it was about to be ruined. I approached the circle. Victoria was in the middle of a story, her hands gesturing wildly, and so I told the architect, "If you cannot source the marble from Carrara, don't bother building the foyer." She laughed, a high tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. She spotted me. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes went cold. "Oh, look," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "The help has arrived. Ladies, grab a drink. It is locally sourced." She reached for a glass without looking, her eyes still fixed on her friends. I saw the moment happen before it actually did. I saw the angle of her hand. I saw the tilt of the tray. I could have corrected it. I could have shifted my weight, balanced the silver, and saved the dress. I had spent 40 years walking on steel beams 500 feet in the air. I had balance that a ballerina would envy, but I didn't correct it. I let my left knee buckle just a fraction of an inch. A tremor of old age, a slip of the boot. The tray tipped. Gravity took over. 6 crystal flutes filled to the brim with sticky orange peach puree and Prosecco slid off the silver surface. They didn't fall randomly. They fell in a perfect cascade, a waterfall of sugar and alcohol. They landed directly in Victoria's lap. The sound of shattering crystal cut through the jazz music like a gunshot. Splash, crash, silence. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The orange liquid soaked into the silver Valentino, instantly turning the shimmering fabric into a dark, wet, sticky mess. It dripped down her legs. It pooled around her expensive heels. Victoria looked down. She touched the fabric. She looked at her hand wet with Bellini. Then she screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated rage. She jumped up, knocking her chair over. "You idiot! You filthy, clumsy idiot! Look what you did! This is vintage! This is irreplaceable!" I stood there holding the empty tray, my head bowed. I let my hands shake. I let my mouth hang open in shock. I am sorry, ma'am," I stammered. "The arthritis." My hand just gave out. She didn't care about my arthritis. She stepped forward, her face twisted into a mask of fury. The socialite facade was gone. The monster was out. She pulled her hand back, and she slapped me. It wasn't a slap for show. It was a full-force, open-handed strike across my face. The sound was louder than the breaking glass. My head snapped to the side. My cheek burned like fire. I tasted copper in my mouth. The entire tent went dead silent. The band stopped playing. 300 people froze, staring at the mother of the bride assaulting an old man in a green jumpsuit. I slowly turned my head back to face her. My cheek was throbbing. I could feel the heat radiating from the skin. Victoria was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She didn't look sorry. She looked satisfied. "Clean it up," she spat. "Get on your knees and clean up this mess before I have you thrown in the kennel." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Fast movement. It was Marcus. He had been standing by the bar watching. He saw the tray fall. He saw the slap. And something inside him snapped. He dropped his drink. He started running toward us, his face contorted with a rage that matched his father's. He wasn't looking at Tiffany. He wasn't looking at the guests. He was looking at the woman who had just struck his father. He was going to kill her. I knew my son. He was gentle, but he had the Jefferson temper buried deep. If he reached her, he would tear this whole charade down right now. He would scream the truth. He would end the game before the finale. I couldn't let him do it. Not yet. The trap wasn't sprung. The guests needed to see the full picture tomorrow. We needed the police. We needed the press. I locked eyes with him. He was 10 feet away, his fists clenched, ready to swing. I widened my eyes. I gave him the look I used to give him when he was a boy and he was about to touch a hot stove, the look that said, "Stop, danger, trust me." I mouthed 2 words. "Not yet." Marcus froze. He skidded to a halt, his chest heaving. He looked at me, seeing the red handprint on my face. He looked at Victoria, who was wiping her dress with a napkin, oblivious to the murder in his eyes. He vibrated with the effort of holding back. I saw a tear leak out of his eye. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, but he did it. He stood down. He swallowed the scream. I turned back to Victoria. I looked at the broken glass on the grass. "Yes, ma'am," I whispered. I slowly lowered myself to my knees. My joints popped in the silence. I began to pick up the shards of crystal with my bare hands. The glass was sharp. I grabbed a jagged piece of a flute stem. I squeezed it. I felt the skin of my thumb slice open. A drop of dark red blood welled up, mixing with the orange puddle of the drink. I held the shard up, letting the blood drip onto the grass near her shoe. Victoria looked down at me, disgust curling her lip. "Hurry up," she snapped, "and don't cut yourself. I don't want your diseases on my shoes." I looked up at her from the ground. I was on my knees, but I didn't feel small. I felt like a giant waiting to crush an ant. I leaned forward just an inch. I lowered my voice to a rasp that only she could hear. "Careful, ma'am," I whispered, staring directly into her eyes. "Glass bites. And blood is dirty. Real dirty. It stains deep. You might never get it out." Victoria paused. She frowned. She looked at my face, searching for the meaning behind the words. She saw the blood on my finger. She saw the flat, dead look in my eyes. For a second, a flicker of doubt crossed her face. A moment of reptilian instinct warning her that something was wrong. But then her arrogance took over. She interpreted my warning as a pathetic apology. She thought I was talking about my own dirty blood ruining her precious evening. She huffed, straightening her ruined dress. "You're damn right it's dirty," she sneered, kicking a piece of glass toward my hand. At least you know what you are. Now finish cleaning. I have to go change into my backup dress." She turned and marched away, leaving a trail of sticky footprints on the artificial turf. The crowd parted for her, murmuring, unsure of what they had just witnessed. I stayed on my knees. I picked up every single piece of glass. My thumb throbbed, bleeding freely now. Marcus walked over. He knelt down beside me, ignoring his tuxedo pants in the dirt. He reached out and took the shard of glass from my hand. "Dad," he whispered, his voice broken. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I looked at him. I smiled. It was a genuine smile. "Don't be, son," I said softly. "She just sealed the deal." I looked at the blood on my thumb. "She thinks this blood is dirty," I said. "Tomorrow she is going to find out that this blood built the ground she is standing on." I stood up, wiping my hand on my green jumpsuit. "Go get some sleep, Marcus," I said. "You have a big day tomorrow. You are getting married." Marcus looked at the red mark on my cheek. "And you?" he asked. I looked toward the house where the lights of my study were waiting. "I have to go make a phone call," I said. "I think the governor needs to know that the entertainment for tomorrow has been upgraded." I walked away from the tent, leaving the party behind. The slap still stung. Good. I wanted it to sting. I wanted to remember it. Because tomorrow when I took the microphone, I wasn't just going to speak. I was going to slap back, and my hand was going to be holding a gavel. The organ music started playing 20 minutes late because Victoria Sinclair was busy screaming at a catering assistant who had dared to put ice in her Chardonnay. I stood by the entrance of the barn, leaning against a post in my green polyester jumpsuit, watching the circus unfold. The heat was oppressive, a wet blanket of humidity that made the silk dresses of the Sinclair guests cling to their bodies in unflattering ways. They fanned themselves with the wedding programs, looking around my farm with expressions of thinly veiled disgust, as if they were afraid they might catch poverty just by breathing the air. The seating arrangement was a masterpiece of segregation. On the left side of the aisle sat the Sinclair faction. It was a sea of pastel linen suits, oversized hats, and faces tight with Botox. They whispered to each other, pointing at the barn rafters, probably making bets on when the whole structure would collapse. On the right side, shoved all the way to the back rows on rusty metal folding chairs, was my family. There was my cousin Ray, who ran a mechanic shop in Macon, wearing his only blue suit that was 2 sizes too small. There was Big Sarah, my sister-in-law, fanning herself with a church fan, looking ready to slap anyone who looked at her sideways. They were good people, honest people, people who knew the value of a handshake and a hard day's work. And the Sinclairs treated them like livestock. I saw an usher hired by Tiffany actually direct my nephew Jamal to the back row when he tried to sit closer to the front, telling him those seats were reserved for VIPs. VIPs. Jamal was a neurosurgeon in Atlanta, but to them he was just another black face in the wrong zip code. I gripped the handle of the rake I was holding. I wasn't gardening, of course. I was just holding it because Tiffany had told me it added to the ambiance. I was a prop, a living lawn ornament. The ceremony was about to begin. The preacher, a man Tiffany had hired because he looked good on camera, was adjusting his microphone. Marcus stood at the altar. He looked pale, sweating profusely in his tuxedo. He caught my eye from across the lawn. He looked terrified. I gave him a slow, steady nod. "Hold the line, son. The cavalry is coming." And then the ground began to vibrate. It wasn't the thunder of a storm. It was a low, deep rumble, the sound of precision engineering and massive horsepower. It started at the main road and grew louder, echoing off the pine trees. Heads turned. The whispering stopped. Even Victoria stopped berating the waiter and looked toward the long gravel driveway. A cloud of red dust rose into the air, signaling the arrival of a convoy. But this wasn't the beat-up Fords and Chevys my family drove. The first car to crest the hill was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, black as midnight, the chrome grille gleaming like the gates of heaven in the afternoon sun. It moved slowly, majestic and imposing, indifferent to the potholes. Behind it came a Bentley Flying Spur, then a Mercedes Maybach, then 2 black Cadillac Escalades with tinted windows and government plates. The procession wound its way down the driveway, a snake of steel and money that looked completely alien against the backdrop of my cornfields. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The Sinclair guests stood up, craning their necks. Who could this be? Was it a celebrity? Was it a foreign dignitary? "Victoria," Sinclair gasped, clutching her husband's arm. "Preston, look. It must be the governor. I told you he would come. I sent the invitation to his private office. Oh, thank God, finally some class." She frantically began smoothing her dress, checking her reflection in a spoon. She elbowed her way to the edge of the aisle, ready to greet the important guests, ready to claim them as her own. The cars came to a halt right in front of the old horse stables, parking in a perfect line on the patch of grass I had mowed just yesterday. The engines died. Silence fell over the farm, heavy and expectant. The driver of the Rolls-Royce got out first. He was a mountain of a man in a black suit. He walked around to the rear door and opened it. A leg stepped out. Then another. A man emerged. He was wearing a navy blue suit that cost more than the Sinclairs' foreclosed house. He had silver hair and the posture of a man who owned the room before he even entered it. It was William Vance, the biggest commercial developer in the Southeast, a man I had partnered with on the Olympic Stadium project back in '96. Behind him from the Bentley stepped Mayor Franklin. He was wearing his signature red tie. He adjusted his glasses, looking around the farm with a smile. From the Escalades poured a dozen men and women, the city council, the state senator, the board of directors of Jefferson Construction, my board. The crowd gasped. These were faces they saw on the news. These were the power brokers of the state. Victoria Sinclair let out a squeal of delight. She practically ran toward them, her heels sinking into the grass, her arms outstretched. Mayor Franklin, Mr. Vance, what an honor. We are so delighted you could make it to our humble celebration. I am Victoria Sinclair, the mother of the bride. Please, right this way, we have the front row reserved for you. She reached out to grab William Vance's hand. Vance didn't even look at her. He sidestepped her outstretched hand with the grace of a boxer. He didn't stop walking. He didn't look at the altar. He didn't look at the bride who was peeking out from the bridal tent, her mouth agape. He looked straight at the barn. He looked straight at the old man in the green jumpsuit holding a rake. Victoria froze her hand hanging in empty air. She looked confused. She turned to follow his gaze. "Excuse me," she stammered. "The VIP seating is that way? You are going toward the gardening shed." Vance ignored her. The entire group ignored her. They walked past the stunned guests. They walked past Preston Sinclair, who was gaping like a fish. They walked right off the white carpet and onto the dirt. They walked straight to me. My heart swelled. Cohen had done it. He hadn't just invited them. He had told them the score. I stood up straighter. I dropped the rake. It clattered against the wood of the barn. William Vance stopped 3 feet in front of me. He looked at my polyester jumpsuit. He looked at the staff patch on my chest. He looked at the red handprint that was still faintly visible on my cheek from last night. His eyes narrowed. A look of cold fury passed over his face, directed at the crowd behind him. Then he smiled at me, a warm, genuine smile of respect. He extended his hand. Mr. Chairman Vance said, his voice booming in the silence. "It has been too long." I took his hand. His grip was firm. "It surely has, William," I said, my voice dropping, the country accent returning to the timbre of the boardroom. "Good to see you. How is the knee?" "Better than your wardrobe, apparently." Vance chuckled, but his eyes remained hard as he glanced at the Sinclairs. "Cohen told us you were going undercover. I didn't realize it was deep cover." Mayor Franklin stepped up next. He didn't just shake my hand. He pulled me into a hug, clapping me on the back. "Zeke." The mayor laughed. "You old son of a gun. You scared us half to death. When Cohen called and said you were activating Clause 7, I thought you were dying. I didn't know you were just gardening." "Just doing a little weeding, Mr. Mayor," I said, looking over his shoulder at the Sinclairs. "Just clearing out the invasive species." One by one they lined up. The senator, the CEO of the bank, the head of the zoning commission. They shook the hand of the gardener. They bowed their heads in respect. They called me sir. They called me boss. They called me Mr. Jefferson. The murmuring in the crowd grew to a roar. People were standing up on their chairs to see. My cousin Ray was laughing so hard he was slapping his knee. But the Sinclairs. They looked like they had been hit by a truck. Victoria had stumbled back to her seat, fanning herself frantically. Preston was wiping sweat from his forehead with a napkin, his eyes darting back and forth between me and the luxury cars. Tiffany came running out of the bridal tent. She had forgotten her bouquet. She ran up to Marcus at the altar. "Marcus," she hissed loud enough for the front row to hear, "what is happening? Why is the mayor talking to your gardener? Why are they shaking his hand?" Marcus looked at her. He looked at me, surrounded by the titans of industry. He smiled, a real smile. "Maybe they like his gardening," Marcus said. Tiffany stomped her foot. Don't be stupid. They are making a mistake. They must think he is someone else. Go tell them. Go tell them to sit down. This is my wedding and they are ruining the aesthetic. She turned and marched toward us. She pushed past the senator. She pushed past William Vance. She marched right up to me, her face twisted in anger. Excuse me, she shouted at the mayor. You are confusing him. This man is the help. He is senile. He thinks he owns the place. Please, step away from him before he tries to ask you for money. The silence that fell was absolute. It was heavy. It was dangerous. William Vance turned slowly to look at Tiffany. He looked at her cheap dress. He looked at her desperate face. Young Lady Vance said, his voice cold as ice. I don't know who you are, and frankly I don't care. But the man I am speaking to built the hospital you were born in. He built the school you failed out of. And he built the bank that is currently foreclosing on your father's house. Tiffany blinked. What Vance pointed a finger at me. This is Isaiah Jefferson, founder and chairman of Jefferson Construction. He owns more land in this state than God. And if he thinks he owns this place, it is because he has the deed in his pocket. Tiffany froze. She looked at me. She looked at my eyes. She looked for the confused old man she had bullied. I didn't give him to her. I gave her the wolf. I took off my cap. I brushed a speck of dust off my green jumpsuit. Hello, Tiffany, I said, my voice clear, sharp, and educated. I believe you have something of mine. A ring? Or maybe a dignity you borrowed and forgot to return. She took a step back. She shook her head. No, that's impossible. Marcus said you were a farmer. I am a farmer, I said. I farm land. I farm buildings. And sometimes when the season is right, I farm justice. I looked past her at the crowd. Please take your seats, everyone, I shouted. The show is just beginning. I turned back to Tiffany. Go to the altar, my dear. Your groom is waiting. We wouldn't want to keep the notary waiting, would we? She stared at me, her face pale as a sheet. She looked at the mayor. She looked at the Rolls-Royce. The reality was crashing down on her, but her greed was a strong anchor. She couldn't let go. She couldn't believe it. It's a trick, she whispered. It has to be a trick. She turned and ran back to the altar, grabbing Marcus's arm. Marry me, she hissed. Marry me right now, before he ruins it. I watched her go. I watched the desperation. I looked at William Vance. Ready for the main event, I asked. Vance grinned. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Zeke. We walked together toward the front row. The Sinclairs shrank back in their seats as we approached. I sat down in the chair reserved for the father of the groom. I crossed my legs. I folded my hands over my chest. I looked at the preacher. Proceed, I said. The organ music swelled again, shaky and discordant. The wedding of the century was back on. But this time everyone knew who was really walking down the aisle. It wasn't a bride. It was a defendant walking toward her sentencing. The preacher was a man with a tan that came from a bottle and a smile that cost more than my tractor. He stood under the floral archway that Tiffany had screamed at the florist to construct just hours before. He wiped sweat from his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief, looking nervously between the bride, who was vibrating with a mixture of rage and adrenaline, and the front row where the governor of Georgia was currently checking his watch. The air was thick, suffocatingly hot, and heavy with the scent of impending disaster. I sat in the front row, flanked by William Vance and Mayor Franklin. I could feel the eyes of the Sinclair family boring into the back of my neck. They were terrified. They didn't understand why the most powerful men in the state were sitting next to the groundskeeper. They were whispering furiously among themselves, probably trying to figure out if this was some elaborate prank or a fever dream brought on by the heat. Marcus stood at the altar. He looked steady. The trembling was gone. He looked at Tiffany not with love, but with the cold, analytical gaze of a man inspecting a cracked foundation. He was waiting for the signal. We were all waiting. The preacher cleared his throat into the microphone. The sound screeched through the speakers, making half the guests wince. Dearly beloved, he began, his voice booming and hollow. We are gathered here today to witness the union of Tiffany Sinclair and Marcus Jefferson. A union of love, family, and shared values. I heard William Vance snort softly beside me. Shared values, he muttered under his breath. If the value is bankruptcy and fraud, then sure. I kept my face impassive. I watched Tiffany. She wasn't listening to the sermon. Her eyes were darting around the crowd, tallying the net worth of the guests, calculating the gifts, scanning the horizon for the notary she had hired to seize my land. She looked beautiful on the outside, a vision in white lace and silk, but I had seen the rot underneath. I had seen the receipts from the clinic. I had heard the voice recordings. She was a painted tomb. The preacher droned on about commitment and honesty. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Every word felt like a lie. Every nod from Victoria Sinclair in the second row felt like an insult to the sanctity of marriage. Beatrice would have hated this. She believed a wedding was a covenant with God, not a networking event for social climbers. Finally, the preacher reached the part we had all been waiting for. He paused for dramatic effect, looking out over the sea of sweaty faces. If there is anyone here present who knows of any just cause why this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The silence that followed was traditional. It was usually a formality, a moment for a few awkward coughs before the ceremony proceeded. But today the silence was heavy. It was loaded. I waited 1 beat, 2 beats. Then I stood up. My knees popped. The sound was audible in the quiet barnyard. I stood to my full height in my green polyester jumpsuit, the staff patch catching the sunlight. I didn't rush. I stepped out of the row, moving past the knees of the mayor and the senator. I walked into the center aisle. A gasp rippled through the crowd. It started in the back where my family was sitting, a gasp of confusion and worry. It spread to the Sinclair side, a gasp of horror and indignation. I heard Victoria Sinclair hiss, "Oh my God, he is doing it. He is having an episode." I walked slowly toward the altar. My boots crunched on the white runner Tiffany had laid down over the dirt. I kept my eyes locked on hers. Tiffany's face went from pale to purple in the span of a second. Her eyes bulged. She looked like she was about to explode. She had spent months planning this moment, scripting every second, and here was the dirty, senile gardener ruining her perfect shot. She didn't wait for me to speak. She didn't wait to hear what I had to say. She snapped. "Stop!" She screamed, her voice shrill and piercing, distorted by the microphone Marcus was holding nearby. "Stop right there!" She pointed a shaking finger at me. "Security," she yelled, looking frantically toward the edges of the crowd where 2 burly men in black t-shirts were standing. "Get him out of here. Drag this stinky old man off my stage right now." The security guards hesitated. They looked at me. Then they looked at the front row. They saw the governor. They saw the mayor. They saw William Vance, who was staring at them with a look that could freeze water. They didn't move. They knew better than to lay a hand on a man who was sitting with the kings of the city. Tiffany saw their hesitation and went feral. She stomped her foot, her veil shaking. "Are you deaf?" she shrieked. "He is ruining my wedding. He is senile. He thinks he is a guest. Get him out before he drools on my dress." I kept walking. I reached the steps of the altar. I walked up the 3 wooden stairs until I was standing level with the bride and groom. Tiffany recoiled from me as if I were radioactive. She grabbed Marcus's arm, digging her nails into his tuxedo jacket. "Marcus, do something," she hissed. "Your father is humiliating us. Throw him out. Tell him to go back to the barn." I looked at Marcus. He looked back at me. He didn't pull away from her. He didn't look angry. He looked calm. He raised the microphone to his lips. "Wait," Marcus said. His voice was steady, amplified through the speakers echoing across the fields. Tiffany stared at him, shocked. "Wait, what do you mean, wait? Get him out of here." "No," Marcus said firmly. He gently pried her fingers off his arm. He took a half step away from her, creating a physical distance that felt like a canyon. "My father has something to say," Marcus announced to the crowd. "And I believe he has a wedding gift." A hush fell over the audience. A gift. Tiffany blinked. Her brain tried to process the shift. A gift. Her eyes darted to my hands. She saw that I was holding a large, thick manila envelope. I saw the gears turning in her head. I saw the greed override the anger. She remembered the notary. She remembered the power of attorney. She remembered the $20 million worth of lithium under the soil. She thought I was capitulating. She thought the senile old man had forgotten where he was and wandered up to give her the deed to the farm as a present. Her face transformed instantly. The rage vanished, replaced by a radiant, terrifyingly fake smile. She clasped her hands together over her chest. "Oh," she gasped, playing to the crowd. "A gift. Oh, Daddy Zeke. You shouldn't have. She stepped toward me. Her eyes locked on the envelope. Is it the paperwork? She whispered low enough that the microphone wouldn't catch it, but loud enough for me to hear. Did you bring the deed? I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had called me a dog, who had poisoned my tea, who had mocked my poverty. I held up the envelope. It was heavy. It was filled with the truth. I surely did, Tiffany, I said, my voice projecting clearly without the need for a microphone. I brought you something special, something you have been working very hard for. Tiffany reached out for the envelope. Her fingers were trembling with anticipation. She thought she had won. She thought the game was over and she was taking home the trophy. I let her grab the edge of the envelope. I held on to the other side for just a second longer, letting the tension build. Open it, I said softly. I think you will find it very illuminating. She snatched it from my hand. She ripped open the seal with a violence that betrayed her hunger. She reached inside. The crowd leaned forward. The Sinclairs in the second row held their breath. Preston was practically vibrating in his seat. Tiffany pulled out the contents. It wasn't a deed. It was a stack of photographs, and a USB drive, and a stapled document with the seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation on the cover page. Tiffany frowned. She looked at the first photograph. It was a picture of her. But she wasn't at a wedding dress fitting. She wasn't at a bakery tasting cakes. She was sitting in a car with a man who was definitely not Marcus. He was kissing her neck. His hand was up her skirt. It was the personal trainer, Jax. The photo was high resolution, taken with a telephoto lens by my investigator just 3 days ago. Tiffany's breath hitched. She flipped to the next photo. It was a picture of her walking out of the aesthetic clinic. Her lips were swollen. She was holding a receipt. She flipped to the next one. It was a photocopy of the patient intake form where she had checked the box marked "No" next to the question, "Are you pregnant?" Her hands started to shake. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax statue. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wide with terror. She looked at the crowd. She realized with a dawning horror that she wasn't holding the keys to the kingdom. She was holding her own indictment. What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It is your gift," I said, my voice booming. "It is the truth." I turned to the crowd. I looked at the governor. I looked at William Vance. I looked at my family in the back row. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "I apologize for the interruption, but there seems to be a misunderstanding about the nature of this union." I signaled to the sound booth where Cohen was standing next to the technician. "Hit it, Cohen." The massive LED screen behind the altar, the one that was supposed to show a montage of Marcus and Tiffany's love story, flickered to life. It didn't show romantic walks on the beach. It showed a video clip. Grainy black and white night vision. It showed Victoria and Preston Sinclair creeping into my bedroom like thieves. It showed Preston digging through my underwear drawer. It showed Victoria screaming at him to find the ring. The crowd gasped. A collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the barnyard. Preston Sinclair stood up in the second row, knocking his chair over. "Turn it off," he screamed. "Turn it off right now." But the video continued. It cut to a new scene. It was Tiffany. She was in the pool house. The audio was crystal clear. "I am marrying a bank account, not a man. The old man is practically dead already. We tricked him into signing." Her voice echoed across the farm. Her cruel laughter bounced off the trees. Tiffany dropped the photos. She covered her ears with her hands. "Stop it. Stop it. That's not real. That's a deep fake." I stepped closer to her. I loomed over her. "Is it?" I asked. "Is the receipt from the clinic a fake? Is the fact that you aren't pregnant a fake?" Tiffany stared at me. She looked at Marcus. Marcus was standing there, his arms crossed, watching her with a look of absolute disgust. "Marcus," she pleaded, reaching for him. "Marcus, baby, don't listen to him. He is crazy. He is trying to ruin us. I am pregnant. I am..." Marcus looked at her stomach. He looked at her eyes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. He unfolded it. It was the receipt I had pulled from the trash. "Juvederm Ultra," Marcus read aloud. Question 4. "Are you pregnant? Answer no. Signature Tiffany Sinclair." He crumpled the paper and threw it at her feet. "You aren't pregnant, Tiffany." Marcus said, his voice cold and final. "You are just empty." Tiffany looked at the paper on the ground. She looked at the screen where her mother was currently being shown poisoning my tea. She looked at the crowd of people who were now standing, murmuring, taking photos, witnessing her total destruction. She let out a scream, a primal animalistic scream of rage and defeat. "You ruined everything," she shrieked at me, lunging forward, her hands curled into claws. "You stupid, dirty old man, I should have killed you myself." She tried to scratch my face. She tried to hurt me, but she never got the chance, because before she could touch me, a heavy hand landed on her shoulder. It wasn't Marcus. It was the sheriff. He had stepped out from behind the VIP tent accompanied by 2 deputies and a man in a suit who flashed a federal badge. "Tiffany Sinclair," the agent said, "you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, and attempted assault." The wedding was over. The sentencing had begun. I didn't open the envelope to read a speech. I didn't need a microphone to tell the world what kind of people the Sinclairs were. Words can be debated, words can be twisted, but pictures don't lie. And high-definition video with crystal-clear audio, that is the hammer of God. I looked at Tiffany, who was trembling like a leaf in a gale. I looked at her parents huddled in the second row, their faces masks of confusion and dread. They were waiting for me to pull out a deed. They were waiting for the surrender. Instead, I turned my back to them. I faced the massive LED screen that towered behind the altar. It was a monstrosity of technology 20 feet high, rented to display a slideshow of their fake romance. It was currently showing a static image of their monogram intertwined in gold calligraphy. I raised my hand and snapped my fingers. "Cohen," I said, my voice cutting through the humid air. "Light it up." The screen flickered. The gold monogram vanished, replaced by a burst of static. The crowd murmured, confused. Was this part of the show? Was this a technical glitch? Then the image stabilized. It wasn't a professional wedding video. It was grainy black and white footage shot from a high angle. It was my front porch. The timestamp in the corner read Tuesday, 6:14 p.m. A collective hush fell over the 300 guests. They squinted against the sun, trying to make out the shapes on the screen. The image was sharp enough to see the sweat on Victoria Sinclair's forehead. It showed me sitting on the bench whittling. It showed Victoria bustling around the table with the tea tray, and then the camera zoomed in. It was a digital zoom, pixelated but undeniable. The crowd watched as Victoria reached into her bra. They watched as she pulled out a small glass vial. They watched as she uncorked it and tipped a white powder into the china cup. A gasp ripped through the audience. It started low and surged into a wave of shock. Is she poisoning him?" Someone whispered loudly near the front. The video continued. Victoria stirred the tea with her pinky finger. She smiled. It was a smile that looked demonic on the giant screen. On the video, the audio kicked in. "It is wonderful for the nerves," Victoria's recorded voice boomed across the pasture. "This will help you relax." In the second row, Victoria let out a strangled cry. She jumped to her feet, her hands flying to her mouth. "No," she screamed. "That is not real. That is edited." I turned to look at her. "Sit down, Victoria," I commanded. "We are just getting to the good part." The screen flickered again. The scene changed. Now it was color footage. The resolution was crisp. It was the interior of a pool house. Sunlight streamed in through the open door, illuminating Tiffany Sinclair lying on a lounge chair. She wasn't alone. A man, muscular and shirtless, was pouring her a drink. The crowd went silent. Dead silent. The only sound was the wind in the trees and the voice of the bride booming from the speakers. "I am marrying a bank account, not a man," Tiffany's voice said. It was casual, bored, cruel. Tiffany, standing at the altar, let out a wail. She clawed at her face, shaking her head. "Turn it off. Turn it off." But the video played on. "The old man is practically dead already," the recording continued. "We tricked him into signing power of attorney last night. He is going straight to a nursing home on Monday morning, the cheapest one we can find." The guests turned to look at Tiffany. The disgust on their faces was palpable. These were her friends, her social circle, and they were watching her peel back her own skin to reveal the monster underneath. "And the land?" the man in the video asked. "Sold," Tiffany replied on screen. $20 million for the lithium rights." Then came the moment that made the mothers in the audience gasp in horror. On the screen, Tiffany stood up. She reached under her shirt. There was a ripping sound of Velcro. She pulled out a padded, flesh-colored prosthetic, a fake belly. She threw it on the table. "Help me get this thing off," she complained. "It is itching like crazy. God, pretending to be pregnant is the hardest work I have ever done." The reaction was visceral. People stood up. Chairs scraped against the ground. Shouts of "shame" and "disgusting" rang out. My cousin Ray stood up in the back and yelled, "That is the devil right there!" Tiffany looked like she was burning alive. She was shrinking, curling in on herself, her eyes darting around looking for an escape route. But there was nowhere to go. The screen was 50 feet wide. Her sin was written in the sky. But I wasn't done. "Cohen," I said. "The finale." The screen changed one last time. This wasn't a video, it was a slideshow of documents, but they were blown up to the size of billboards. The first was a bankruptcy filing from the state of Florida. Chapter 7. Debtor Preston Sinclair. Liabilities $5 million. The second was a foreclosure notice for the Sinclair estate in Atlanta. Final notice. Eviction scheduled for August 1st. The crowd was buzzing now. The whispers were a roar. "They're broke. They owe everyone money." I knew that purse was fake. And then the final slide. It was a mugshot. It was younger, maybe 10 years ago, but it was unmistakably Preston Sinclair. His hair was darker, but the weak chin and the shifty eyes were the same. Next to the mugshot was an active warrant issued by the Securities and Exchange Commission and the state of Florida. Wanted Preston Sinclair, charges wire fraud, embezzlement, grand larceny, flight to avoid prosecution. The silence broke. It shattered. Panic erupted in the Sinclair section. People were scrambling away from Preston as if he were on fire. Preston was frozen in his chair, staring at his own face on the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a dying fish. "This is a lie!" Preston screamed, standing up and waving his arms. "That is not me. That is identity theft." "Is it?" I asked, my voice amplified by the microphone Marcus was still holding. "Because the federal agents parked behind the barn seem to think it looks a lot like you." Tiffany snapped. The pressure, the humiliation, the total collapse of her carefully constructed world, it was too much. Her brain broke. She didn't cry. She didn't faint. She attacked. She let out a shriek that sounded like a banshee. She lunged toward this control booth, toward the screen, toward anything she could destroy to make the truth stop. "Turn it off," she screamed. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly hatred. She ran past me. She ran past the mayor. She was heading for the cables running to the LED wall, intending to rip them out with her bare hands, but she never made it. Marcus stepped into her path. He didn't grab her. He didn't push her. He just stood there, solid as an oak tree, blocking her way. "Move!" she shrieked, clawing at his chest, ripping the lapels of his tuxedo. "Move, you idiot! Do what I say!" Marcus caught her wrists. He held them firmly, stopping her assault. He looked down at her. His face was calm. It was the calm of a man who had walked through the fire and come out the other side without a burn. He looked at her tear-stained face. He looked at the fake belly she wasn't wearing anymore. He looked at the woman who had called him a golden retriever. "Let go of me," she spat. "You are nothing. You are a stupid country boy. You don't know anything." Marcus tightened his grip just enough to silence her. He leaned in close. The microphone in his hand picked up every breath, every syllable. "You are right," Marcus said. His voice was low, deep, and cold. "I am a country boy. I grew up in the mud. I grew up cleaning stalls and fixing fences." He looked her in the eye. "But you know what you learn when you grow up on a farm?" Tiffany stared at him, panting, her eyes wild. "You learn to smell rot," Marcus said. "You learn to smell trash before you step in it. And right now," he released her wrists and shoved her backward away from him, "you smell like a landfill." The crowd erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was a roar of approval. My family in the back was cheering. Even the governor was nodding, a grim smile on his face. Tiffany stumbled back, tripping on the hem of her dress. She fell hard onto the white runner sitting in the dirt. She looked up at Marcus, then at me, then at the screen where her father's mugshot still loomed over the ceremony. She looked at the guests. They weren't looking at her with envy anymore. They were looking at her with pity and revulsion. She covered her face with her hands and screamed. It was the sound of a predator, realizing it had become the prey. I looked at Marcus. He adjusted his jacket. He looked at me and winked. I stepped up to the microphone. "I believe I said to the crowd that concludes the entertainment portion of the evening. Now, if you will all look to your left, I believe the authorities have a few wedding gifts to deliver." As if on cue, the flashing blue lights of the police cruisers lit up the trees behind the barn. The siren chirped once. The wedding was over. The cleanup was just beginning. The sirens wailed, cutting through the heavy silence that had settled over the farm. 3 police cruisers and 2 black government SUVs tore across the pasture, their tires churning up the manicured grass and the white runner. dust and blue light filled the air. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. Cohen had timed it perfectly. Officers poured out of the vehicles. They didn't look like local deputies writing speeding tickets. These were federal agents in windbreakers that said FBI in bold yellow letters. They moved with purpose, flanking the rows of chairs, creating a perimeter around the Sinclair family. Preston Sinclair tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. He scrambled out of his chair, knocking over Victoria in his haste, and bolted toward the woods. He made it about 10 feet before a young agent tackled him into the dirt. "Get off me!" Preston shrieked, his face pressed into the red clay. "Do you know who I am? I am Preston Sinclair. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," the agent said, hauling him up by his collar. "Preston Sinclair, you are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and interstate flight to avoid prosecution." They cuffed him. The sound of the metal clicking shut was audible even over the commotion. Preston looked wild, his tuxedo stained with mud, his hair disheveled. He looked at his wife. "Victoria. Do something, call the lawyer." Victoria was too busy trying to save herself. An officer was reading her rights, holding her arm firmly. She was screaming about her dress, about her reputation, about the injustice of it all. "This is a mistake," she yelled at the governor in the front row. "Governor, tell them we are friends. We donated to your campaign." The governor didn't even blink. He just sipped his iced tea and looked away. Then there was Tiffany. She was still on the ground where Marcus had shoved her. She watched her father being dragged away. She watched her mother being handcuffed. She saw her entire world disintegrating in real time. She looked at Marcus. He was standing above her, tall and unmovable. Tiffany scrambled to her knees. She crawled toward him, her white dress dragging in the dust. She wrapped her arms around his legs, clinging to him like a drowning woman clinging to a spar. "Marcus," she wailed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "Marcus, please, you have to help them. They are my parents." Marcus looked down at her. He didn't move. He didn't offer a hand. He just watched her with cold, dead eyes. Tiffany sobbed harder, burying her face in his trousers. "Baby, please, I love you. You know I love you. That video, that was just talk. It was a joke. I was just blowing off steam. I didn't mean any of it." "A joke," Marcus repeated, his voice flat. "You called me a golden retriever. You said you wanted to vomit when I touched you. That's a hell of a punchline, Tiffany." "I was scared," she cried, looking up at him with wide, desperate eyes. "I was scared of the commitment. It was cold feet. But I love you, Marcus. We are supposed to be a family. We are having a baby." Marcus laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. He reached down and peeled her fingers off his leg one by one. "Stop lying," he said. "We both saw the receipt. There is no baby. There is no family. There is just you and a mountain of debt." Tiffany fell back onto her heels. She looked around wildly. She saw the guests staring at her with revulsion. She saw the police loading her parents into the cars. She was losing. She was losing everything. But then her eyes landed on the barn, on the land, on the $20 million worth of lithium she thought was still within her grasp. She scrambled up. She wiped her face. She tried to compose herself to salvage the one thing that mattered to her more than dignity: the money. "Okay," she said, her voice shaking but gaining a frantic edge. "Okay, fine. My parents are criminals. I admit it. But I am not them, Marcus. I am your wife. Well, almost. We can still do this. We can still get married. We can sell the land. We can start over, just you and me. We can pay off the debts and go to Bali. We can be happy." She reached for his hand again. "Think about the money, Marcus. $20 million. We can have anything we want." I stepped forward then. I walked up the stairs of the altar, my boots heavy on the wood. I reached into the breast pocket of my green jumpsuit and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a deed. It was a trust document. I cleared my throat. "Excuse me, Tiffany," I said. She spun around to face me, her eyes narrowing. "What do you want, old man?" "Stay out of this." I held up the paper. "I think there is something you should know before you try to close this deal," I said calmly. I unfolded the document. "This is the deed to the farm," I said. "And this is the incorporation paper for the Jefferson Trust." I pointed to the bottom of the page. "Do you see this name?" I asked. She squinted. "Isaiah Jefferson." "That's right," I said. "And do you see Marcus's name anywhere on this document as an owner?" She scanned the paper frantically. No, he is the trustee. He manages it. I smiled. He manages the operations I corrected. He manages the cows. He manages the corn, but he does not own the dirt. I leaned closer to her. The land belongs to me, Tiffany. The lithium belongs to me. The money belongs to me. Marcus. He draws a salary. A good salary, mind you, but he doesn't have $20 million. He doesn't have a deed to sign over. He can't sell you this farm any more than he can sell you the moon. I paused, letting the words sink in. So if you marry him, I continued, you are not marrying a millionaire. You are marrying a man with a truck, a dog, and a father who will make sure you never see a dime of the family fortune. I looked her up and down. So tell me, Tiffany, do you still love him? Do you still want to go to Bali with a man who can't pay for your first-class ticket? The effect was instantaneous. It was like watching a light switch flip. The desperation vanished from her face. The tears stopped. The love evaporated. In its place was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. She looked at the paper. She looked at me. She looked at Marcus. She realized the game was truly over. There was no pot of gold. There was no payday. There was just a man she despised and a debt she couldn't pay. She dropped Marcus's hand as if it were a hot coal. She stepped back, smoothing her dress, her face twisting into a sneer. You tricked me, she spat. You led me on. You made me believe he was rich. I didn't make you believe anything I said. You saw what you wanted to see. You saw a victim, but you should have looked closer. You should have looked at the boots. She let out a scream of frustration. She ripped the veil off her head and threw it on the ground. She stomped on it, grinding the white lace into the dirt. I hate you, she screamed at Marcus. I hate you. You wasted my time. You wasted my youth. I could have married a hedge fund manager. I could have been someone. She turned to me. And you are a devil. You are a sick, twisted old man. I tipped my cap. Thank you, ma'am. Coming from you, that is a compliment. A federal agent stepped onto the platform. He approached Tiffany. Ms. Sinclair, he asked. What she snapped. We have a warrant for you as well, he said calmly. Conspiracy to commit fraud, accessory to embezzlement, and based on the video evidence provided by Mr. Jefferson, attempted assault on a senior citizen. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Tiffany's eyes went wide. No, you can't. I am the victim here. They lied to me. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back, the agent said, his voice leaving no room for argument. She tried to run. She actually tried to bolt in her heels across the uneven stage, but she didn't get far. The agent grabbed her arm and spun her around. Click, click. She was cuffed. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the bride was led down the aisle, not by her father, but by a federal agent. She was screaming profanities, kicking at the dirt, a white specter of greed being hauled away to face justice. They loaded her into the back of a cruiser next to her mother. I saw them through the window screaming at each other, blaming each other for the downfall. The cars started up. The sirens chirped again. The convoy of police vehicles drove back down the driveway, kicking up a cloud of red dust that settled over the empty altar. Silence returned to the farm. I looked at Marcus. He was standing there watching the cars go. He looked tired. He looked sad. But he also looked free. He turned to me. He didn't say anything. He just walked over and hugged me. It was a fierce, bone-crushing hug. Thank you, Dad, he whispered into my shoulder. I patted his back. You did good, son. You did good. I pulled away. I looked out at the crowd. 300 people were staring at us, unsure of what to do. The wedding was ruined. The food was getting cold. The bride was in jail. I saw the governor looking at his watch. I saw William Vance smiling. I saw my family in the back row looking ready to start a party or a riot depending on the signal. I walked to the microphone. I tapped it twice. Thump, thump. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice echoing across the pasture. I apologize for the change in programming. It seems the bride had a prior engagement with the federal government. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. It was nervous laughter at first, then genuine amusement. However, I continued, we have 300 pounds of roast pig, we have 20 cases of champagne, and we have a band that has been paid in full. I looked at Marcus. We may not be celebrating a marriage today, I said, but I think we have something much better to celebrate. I raised my hand. We are celebrating my son's freedom. We are celebrating the fact that the Jeffersons don't get played, and we are celebrating the fact that the trash just took itself out." The crowd cheered. My family jumped up, clapping and hollering. Even the stiff suits in the front row were smiling. So I shouted, "Please eat, drink, dance." The bar is open, and unlike the Sinclair's credit, the drinks are free. I turned to the band leader, who was staring at me with his mouth open. "Hit it, boys," I yelled. "Play something funky." The band kicked into a high-energy soul track. The music filled the air, chasing away the tension. People started moving. They started laughing. They started heading for the food. William Vance walked up to the stage. He clapped me on the shoulder. "Hell of a show, Zeke," he shouted over the music. "Hell of a show." I grinned. I unzipped my green jumpsuit, stepping out of it to reveal my charcoal Italian suit underneath. I tossed the polyester uniform into the dirt. "Just another day on the job." "William," I said, "just taking out the weeds." I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. I handed one to Marcus. "To freedom, son," I said. Marcus clinked his glass against mine. "To freedom, Dad." We drank. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the farm. The nightmare was over. The stinky country boy had won. And the party was just getting started. The seasons have a way of washing things clean. The red Georgia clay gets hard in the winter, cracking under the frost, and then the spring rains come and soften it up again, ready for new life. It has been exactly 1 year since the blue lights of the police cruisers faded down my driveway. 1 year since the screaming stopped. 1 year since the circus left town. I sat on my front porch, the same porch where Victoria Sinclair had tried to poison me. But the air was different now. It didn't smell like desperation and cheap perfume anymore. It smelled like barbecue smoke and honeysuckle. The artificial turf was long gone, ripped up and hauled away. The grass had grown back wild and green and real. I rocked in my chair, the wood creaking a familiar rhythm. I wasn't whittling today. I was holding a glass of sweet tea. Ice cold. No bitter aftertaste. Just sugar and lemon and peace. I looked out at the vegetable garden. It wasn't a mini golf course. It was thriving. The tomatoes were heavy on the vine, turning red in the afternoon sun. And kneeling in the dirt right where Victoria had crushed my pepper plant was Sarah. Sarah wasn't a socialite. She didn't know the difference between a Birkin bag and a grocery sack, and she didn't care. She was wearing a pair of denim overalls that were covered in mud, her hair tied back in a messy bun that was unraveling in the humidity. She was laughing, pulling a stubborn weed from the okra row. I smiled. I remembered the first time I met her. It was the day I infiltrated the clinic to catch Tiffany. I had been rushing to the stairwell with the trash bag evidence, and my old knees had buckled. I stumbled, nearly hitting the floor. The receptionist had ignored me. The patients had stepped over me. But Sarah, who had been there visiting her sister, dropped her purse and caught me by the arm. She didn't look at my janitor uniform with disgust. She looked at me with concern. She helped me to a chair. She got me a cup of water. She sat with me until I caught my breath. She didn't know I was a millionaire. She just saw an old man who needed a hand. That was the woman my son married 3 months ago. No cameras, no governor, no white runner over the dirt. Just a preacher on the porch, a few friends, and a potluck dinner that tasted better than any catered meal I have ever had. I looked toward the barn. Marcus was there. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt stained with oil. He was working on the tractor grease up to his elbows. He looked up, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. He saw Sarah in the garden. He stopped working. He just watched her. The look on his face wasn't the panicked, desperate look of a man being held hostage. It was the look of a man who had found his anchor. He walked over to her, stepping carefully between the rows. He said something I couldn't hear. Sarah looked up, beaming. She reached up and wiped a smudge of dirt off his cheek with her thumb. He leaned down and kissed her. It was real. It was quiet. It was boring. And it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I took a sip of my tea. The silence of the farm was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was full. It was full of the things that matter. The Sinclairs were gone. Erased. I heard through the grapevine that Preston took a plea deal, 5 years in a minimum security facility in Florida. Victoria was awaiting trial for attempted poisoning, her social standing reduced to a prison ID number. And Tiffany. The last I heard, she was out on bail, living in a motel 2 counties over, trying to sell her story to tabloids that weren't buying. She had tried to reach out to Marcus once, a letter sent to the house. Marcus didn't even open it. He tossed it into the fireplace and watched it burn. He didn't say a word. He just watched the paper turn to ash, and then he went back to living his life. We didn't sell the land. The lithium is still down there sleeping under the soil. Maybe one day we will mine it, maybe we won't. But if we do, it will be on our terms. It will be for the future of the children Sarah and Marcus are talking about having. Real children, not bargaining chips. Sarah stood up, dusting off her knees. She grabbed the basket of vegetables she had picked. She walked toward the porch, her boots crunching on the gravel. "Hey, Pop," she called out. She called me Pop, not Zeke, not Mr. Jefferson. "Pop, I got enough okra here to fry up a mountain," she said, climbing the steps. "Marcus says he is starving." "You hungry?" "I surely am," I said. "Need some help in the kitchen." She laughed. "You stay right there. You worked hard enough this morning fixing that fence. I got this. Oh, and Pop. Yeah, Cohen called while you were napping. He said the deed transfer is final. The trust is updated." I nodded. "Good." She paused at the door. She looked at me. Her eyes were kind, honest. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what I asked." "For saving him," she said, looking back at Marcus in the field. "He told me everything. About the other girl. About the trap. If you hadn't fought for him, he wouldn't be the man he is today." "I didn't save him, Sarah," I said. "I just woke him up. He did the rest." She smiled and went inside. The screen door slammed shut. The smell of frying oil and cornmeal started to waft out. I sat back. I looked up at the sky. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of purple and gold. It was the same sky I used to watch with Beatrice. I reached into my pocket. I didn't have the ring there anymore. The ring was on Sarah's finger. It fit her perfectly. She didn't ask for it. I gave it to her the day Marcus proposed. She cried. She said she was afraid to wear it gardening. I told her dirt washes off, but a good heart shines through anything. I closed my eyes. I felt the breeze on my face. "Beatrice," I whispered to the wind. "Can you see them? Can you see our boy?" I felt a warmth in my chest, a sense of completion. "I cleaned the weeds, Beatrice," I whispered. "I pulled them up by the roots. The garden is safe. The soil is good. We can grow again." I sat there for a long time, just listening to the sounds of my home, the tractor engine, the sizzling pan in the kitchen, the dogs barking in the distance. It was the symphony of a life reclaimed. I wasn't the chairman of the board tonight. I wasn't the millionaire developer. I was just Isaiah. I was a father. I was a father-in-law. And soon, God willing, I would be a grandfather. I took one last sip of tea. I set the glass down. The world is full of noise. It is full of people screaming to be heard, people painting over the cracks in their lives with gold paint, hoping no one notices the rot. But the truth is quiet. The truth doesn't need a microphone. It just needs time. I stood up. My joints popped, but I felt light. I felt strong. I turned to go inside to join my family for supper. The stinky country boy was hungry, and for the first time in a long time, the table was set with love. In a world obsessed with filters and facades, the most dangerous man in the room isn't the one shouting about his wealth, but the one who has nothing to prove. They saw dirt on my boots and assumed I was weak. They didn't realize that dirt meant I owned the ground they stood on. Respect isn't a transaction you negotiate with a bank account. It's the currency of the soul. If you have to buy your seat at the table, you're already on the menu. Never underestimate the quiet ones. We hear the loudest secrets. If you enjoyed watching the trash get taken out today, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps the truth get heard. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by someone just because of how you looked? I want to hear your story. Don't forget to subscribe. We have a lot more weeds to pull and a lot more truth to tell. See you in the next one.